right, what is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Mets Weekly Podcast. We got a great show for you guys today, but before we get into all of that, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Mets Weekly YouTube channel for weekly episodes of our show that are now recorded every Monday night, typically at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which is this current time. For those of you watching or listening on playback, you want to join the conversation in the future, make sure to turn on your post notifications to know when we go live, as well as multiple videos that will go out throughout the week, all off season long. We've got one going out tomorrow at 5:30. For those of you who are in the live chat right now, want to let you know we love reading your comments, your questions, your concerns. And if you feel like you're being ignored, you're not being ignored. We're just starring them throughout the show, so we'll try to pull up as many as we can to keep the flow of the conversation going. And some of them may be saved for viewer questions at the end of the show. Follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok for future content over there. And for audio listeners, make sure to follow us on all of your favorite listening platforms to not miss the audio version of new episodes that go up at 9 a.m. the following day. So without further ado, let's get into episode number 104. And as per usual, I'm joined with my usual partners in crime. Frank, another week has gone by. Not much has happened, but we're getting some anticipation with one specific player. Let's just say that. And, we're all just waiting for him to sign, and then I guess the dominoes fall right afterwards.
Exactly. I mean, as we know, he's just the main topic of everybody's wish list. So it's like we've been talking about. But once he makes his move, then everything else can fall into place. Like I've said, not for the Mets, but you just feel like everybody. And then once that happens, all the different positions kind of set their markets once everyone can now move along, because you have to commit so much to one guy. It literally dictates your entire offseason if you are that team. So, I mean, he's just that caliber player that he's really holding up everything.
Yeah, I think we all know who that guy is, and we will definitely get into a deep discussion about him. But speaking of deep discussions and someone who is a very heartfelt poet, Andrew, you're also here. We have some videos coming out this week, one featuring you solo, which is tomorrow, and then one of us, the two of us, addressing two positions that are kind of the two of the main focuses outside of the Soto situation. But at this current moment, how are you feeling? If there's any random thoughts you want to put out there before we get started.
That's a dangerous question, but I'll keep it baseball and Mets specific. I mean, yeah, again, we're waiting for Soto. We've seen it's award week, so that usually is that last kind of boring week is once we get like the MVPs and all that. The qualifying offers are going to be denied for 90% of them on Wednesday. So we got that looking forward to, and then we could start actually getting some shit done. We've seen Soto take meetings, which is ahead of most people thought. We would know this would drag on. This looks like it could be done by the winter meetings, so maybe less than a month. Maybe a little bit longer, but it looks like at least it's moving faster than most other Boris candidates. So again, it's just that kind of lull in the offseason. We've seen obviously the Mets and other teams doing their maneuvering of the Rule 5 draft and their 40-man roster. So maybe there could be tomorrow a random roster dump move, which is possible. But again, until once those qualifying offers are officially denied, I think that's kind of when you'll start seeing some stuff pick up. But again, it's just kind of wait and see and just enjoying the calm before the storm.
Yeah, I mean, the storm, as you should say, I would say it's going to be very fascinating. Like we said, there's a lot of stars on the market, not even just past Soto. There could be a lot of big trades that are made in this offseason as well for some starting pitchers. But we're here to discuss pretty much all of it, and we have plenty to talk about. And today, we do have the presence of special guests, and this One thing I can say is that this Mets podcast duo has been on our show many times before, but it's always fun. One is a Mets and Jets fan out in sunny LA who has the biggest Twitter wrath on the Western Hemisphere. The other one is a even-tempered girl dad from New Jersey with a very unhealthy AI obsession with imaging. But it's always fun. Please help us welcome back John Saponaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez from Till Mets Do Us Part. Good to have you guys back on here. I believe the last time both of you were on. It was during the season in 2024. John, you were on for one of our live shows during the trade deadline. I don't think Ibby was able to make it, but it's good to have you guys back on here. I don't know which one of you wants to go first. I think, I don't know. John, you can go first. I mean, on the left side, I guess.
Sure. First of all, it's great to be back with you guys. It's always fun to do this, whether you guys are on our show, we're on your show, whether we're doing a marathon at the trade deadline. But I think my biggest takeaway so far is that the intro that you just gave us might need to be clipped from this recording and played before the start of our show, because that is spot on. That is definitely accurate, Carson. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, listen, I try to be as specific as I can. I try to paint the picture for everyone. And listen, I think everybody knows you guys at this point, because you guys have been killing it over on your show recently. Ibby, I'll go to you. What's going on with you as well, as long with your co-host as well?
I mean, nothing too much, nothing too crazy. As you guys have already alluded to, it's been we've hit that lull point in the offseason, waiting for a lot of stuff to get rolling, but there's still a lot to talk about, which I'm sure we're going to cover each and every bit of it during this episode. And to echo what John was saying, it's a pretty accurate description of who we are as people. That's why we have that, that yin and yang, if you will, for our show, which we think really plays up well for everybody. And I wouldn't call I wouldn't call it an obsession. I just like to have fun with it, and I'd like to needle you from time to time as well, Carson. That's all.
All right.
That's all.
Listen, I think there's a lot of obsession that goes on throughout all five of us on here. Specifically, you have Andrew, the Mountain Dew obsession. It's gotten a little bit crazy at some points, which probably fuels a lot of the craziness that he gives us on the screen. But you know what? We're just going to go with it, and it's all going to be mixed in together with this off-season discussion. One thing that I will say is that it's not really the fact that we're waiting for one domino to fall. I think we're all just kind of waiting for this craziness just to end at this point, because we all know of the guy at the helm running this show with Juan Soto. He definitely likes a flair for the dramatic, and when it is in the hands of somebody like Scott Boras, I can just say that not only do the dominoes fall right afterwards, I can just say that it holds a lot of things up, and we have seen a lot of things be held up, especially going even into spring training a lot with some of these players that he represents. But none of them are as big as somebody such as Juan Soto. And I think that a lot of other types of stories that we have had recently have come on involving a lot of the big pieces, such as Garrett Crochet as well. We've seen the Mets kind of linked to them in little fairy dust stories coming throughout there. I do want to give out the biggest headlines, and we can dissect it as much as we can, because there have been mixed reports coming in and out, half hour to half hour, minute to minute, of what they've been going through. So the overall rumor mill that I want to put out here, the latest of biggest that we have heard from Juan Soto on that front, we heard about Carlos Beltran basically publicly talking about Juan Soto, which is something that you don't usually see from guys who are in the front office. And Carlos Beltran kind of talking about how the Mets, they want to improve the team, and there is no doubt that they will go after all the players that are on the open market, knowing that the piece that everyone wants is Juan Soto, and the Mets do not rule out going full blast after him. The latest that we have heard on the Mets front from John Heyman of the New York Post, saying that signs do suggest the meeting went extremely well, and the Mets remain viewed as one of the favorites for Soto. And the word is the Mets presentation was a big production, and it was very detailed. We also have some other stories that have been talked about regarding some other free agents and other targets that have been floated around during this offseason, with the Mets rumored to really spend big with the luxury tax space that they do have. One going to somebody like Garrett Crochet, Anthony DiComo basically talking about the asking price, saying if the Mets are willing to give up one or maybe two of their top 5 prospects for Crochet, then it could get a deal done. We also have some rumors about Roki Sasaki, one of the top arms on the market coming over from Japan, young fireballer. who was posted and is expected most likely to get a minor league contract and not a big major league deal like Yamamoto or Senga got. The Dodgers saying that they are not top contenders. Jim Bowden saying that. Take it as you will. Saying Braves, Rays, Mets, Padres are seen as more likely destinations. We also got some flurry news about, regarding Pete Alonso, but nothing really that substantial. Soto is believed to be the apple of the Mets' eye. This is coming from Mark Feinstein of MLB.com. And the addition of Soto and the enormous contract he is likely to receive could mean the end of Alonso's time in Queens, which we will get into in a second. And then regarding from Bob Nightingale, also kind of relating to what has been going on with Pete Alonso, executives around the MLB believe that Stearns is much interested in spreading money around to address numerous areas by signing somebody like Christian Walker or perhaps moving Vientos to first base and finding a third baseman like Alex Bregman. So there is, of course, a lot to unpack here, but I do want to start off with the Soto discussion, of course, because this is obviously on everybody's mind of what is obviously going to happen and how these dominoes are going to fall right afterwards. This is definitely a very exciting free agency that we have been anticipating for a while, I would say, with a lot of stars being available and kind of just lining it up with how the Mets had this transition year in 2024 where they overachieved, got to the National League Championship Series. Frank, I'll start with you regarding your current feelings around Juan Soto, because I feel like this discussion can just go any direction possible and we can just keep the flow of it. I don't want to keep it as formulated as crazy, but I mean, it's quite a big discussion. It's all really we're going to be talking about until we get a resolution of where he goes this winter.
Yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. We know that he's the Mets' main point of emphasis. He's the guy that they're most focused on. And like we said, the Mets are one of those teams where their offseason is planned around what happens with Juan Soto. If the Mets get Juan Soto, it changes what they're going to do. If they don't get Juan Soto, it changes what they're going to do. So they have basically a couple of different scenarios where it's like, if we get Soto, then we're going to go after these guys. If we don't get Soto, then we're going to go after those guys. And they're not all necessarily the same. So it's just a matter of, I still feel the Mets have a very good shot. They have the market, they have the owner, they have everything that you need to get Juan Soto. Does that mean they'll get him? Not necessarily, but I still feel confident that they have a good shot. Will he decide to come here? Remains to be seen. But like we said, they're just going to wait till it happens. And that's just where we're at.
Now, Andrew, I will get to you as well, because you have been, you and me, we've been pumping out some videos recently on the channel, in addition here of what's been going on. And a lot of us have had that with the thought in mind of possibly Juan Soto coming over here. And then there's also been some stuff about like how they can kind of pivot to that. So kind of working around that, I mean, is there anything that has changed for you in any way recently? Do you just feel exactly the same as the Mets are approaching this with Juan Soto? I mean, I'm a little mixed at this current moment because it just keeps on going back and forth. But I mean, what are your current thoughts of what is going on regarding this big free agent prize?
Yeah, again, I've been kind of steadfast in saying that if the money is the only thing that's going to matter, he will be a New York Met. If there are other factors, I think there'll be, obviously the Yankees can be involved. We've heard nothing about the Dodgers, which people were saying, oh, the Dodgers will get involved. We've heard nothing. It looks he had the 4 meetings. So at this point, like, I still feel confident. Again, this big press tour that Scott Boras wants to make it a dog and pony show of, oh, here are all these meetings, and then Heyman saying, oh, the Red Sox meeting was getting their leverage. The Blue Jays one went great. The Mets one went great. Like, with all that, I give little to no care about, oh, well, the meeting went great. Yeah, they watched a movie together and they talked about New York, on this side, on Queens, instead of the Bronx, and then Toronto did that and all that. So for me, the meeting crap doesn't matter. If it comes down, like I said, if it's coming down to just the bottom line, he just wants the most cold hard cash. Steve Cohen has no excuse not to be that top-end buyer. If he wants to pull a Yamamoto and say, hey, If the Yankees match it and then he wants to go back to the Yankees just because he's comfortable there, fine. But I've always said there is no excuse for Steve not to have the highest bid. If he doesn't get him because of external factors, fine. But there is no excuse for him not to be that highest bidder.
I mean, we've had some instances where sometimes guys just go to other places for less money. We know that the offer was matched for Yamamoto with the Dodgers, and they weren't really going full on out last offseason. We know that Kevin Gausman took less money to go to Toronto. I'm pretty sure there's no taxes there in Toronto, right? Or there is taxes. I don't know. Is it worse? Is it
Can't
better?
be as bad as New
I don't
York.
know. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure like where we're looking at it from, like the financial decision. We already know that there is a look at it for the Mets where they can't get outbid. And Ibby, we were talking about this a lot, in our group chat of a lot of Mets creators that we have in, of where there's been a lot of situations where sometimes the Mets are the high bidder and they just don't end up getting some of these guys. But you also have gone to the point of where, and you've said, and you've kind of elevated in the way where you're like, this seems like the guy that Cohen has had his eye on for a long time. I mean, I feel like that is definitely easy to say. I mean, I do agree that he is someone who's been favorable for a while. It does, line up the timeline with the outfield at this current moment. But do you still feel the same way in that way as this continues day by day, and Boris continues his leaks through John Heyman every single day?
I mean, nothing's really changed on my end. I still feel very confident throughout this entire process. The only thing that's changing for me is just it's just getting anxious and just wanting to hear something, but also knowing that you're not going to get anything until the winter meetings. I mean, the last time he had something this big was when Garrett Cole was a free agent and Anthony Rendon, and then I can't remember who his third representation was, but they ended up getting like over $800 million during the winter meetings. And this is Juan Soto. This is a once in a lifetime hitter, if you will, that's available at the age of 26. When it comes to Boris and the entire thing, this is going to go until the tail end of the winter meetings. I expect him to sign during that time frame. Plus, it's going to give him some time to figure out, because this is a big move. Wherever he ends up going, it's going to be for 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 years. This is going to be a big deal. Will there be some opt-outs? Yeah, maybe. But this is still a huge decision for him. But yes, in terms of Cohen and the money and everything, I still feel like if there was ever a player or ever an opportunity for you to be what every other fan base or every other owner has feared to this point, it's this player. Like, this is a chance for you to legit flex on something. And even if it's to the point where others are like, well, no, you got to work within a budget and it's Stearns and it's this and that. It's like, this could also simply be, a spot where Cohen could say, look, I'm going to get this guy. I'm pretty sure you can make it work with this guy. Once I get him, you can still go about the plan that you want, but we need to have this player. And I don't think David Stearns is going to say no to that. Who wouldn't want Juan Soto on your team to build around for the next decade plus? So I still feel very confident throughout the entire thing. I do believe we're going to have the highest offer. And if it's a substantial amount more than the Yankees, so I think this is really coming down to those two teams. If it's substantial, which I think it will be, because I think they're really going to flex and say, you want top dollar's over here. We have more going for us. We're younger. We have a better outlook over the next 5-10 years. They're top heavy. We have money to spend on top of getting you. I still feel very confident throughout the entire thing. I tweeted the other day, which I laughed at because I already got people bookmarking the tweet, of course. And it was just saying that, Juan Soto was not leaving money on the table. He's not. And that's the way I feel. I think he's taking top dollar. And I truly believe that that's going to be coming from the New York Mets. I do.
Yeah, I mean, I view it more as like this business decision. I mean, that's what you hire Scott Boras for. I mean, it's not like you take the biased offer. We've seen some of these situations where they take the hometown discount or whatever, a higher AV than a higher this and more years to this. There's been some instances where that has happened, but when you're Juan Soto at this high of profile of free agent that you are, and the generational talent that you've been since, I don't know, age 19, age 20, since you came up here, I mean, you're going to look to cash in here and you're going to look for the highest offer. I mean, John, do you feel that in that way? I mean, again, it's like, it always changes, I'd say, because it's just it's ran by Boris, but you never know.
It's funny because during the playoffs, somewhere around the championship series for both leagues, I tweeted out that I think it was 60% and growing that Soto was going to the Yankees. And I think for me, it was simply because he was making it damn near impossible for that franchise to not bring him back. The season that he had there, the season that team had, then making it to the World Series, the postseason that he had, he's making it so difficult. But since then, since the offseason has now begun, since the World Series has concluded, since hearing his comments after the World Series was over, my thought process has shifted a little bit back towards a few basic things that I think are truths. I think Juan Soto is going to take the most money. A lot of people have said that so far, but Juan Soto bet on himself turning down $445 million. That is so much damn money to turn down. He is not now going to turn around and take a hometown discount because of the pride of the pinstripes. And I know this is a Mets show and people are going to like me to dump on the Yankees, but I'm not here to dump on the Yankees. But the fact of the matter is the pinstripes don't mean anything to a 26-year-old player. All of the championships that they won before he was born, before his father was born, before baseball was integrated, before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, when these guys were plumbers in the offseason, it doesn't mean a thing to Juan Soto. But I also don't think that he's going to go to a place that isn't set up with a good plan and a good situation. And that brings me to the next point, something that I kind of had a realization on last week. If you look at the Mets, and I'm not saying the Mets are going to do this or should do this, but if you look at the Mets situation, I asked this of Ibby on our show last week. Can the Mets sign Juan Soto and Pete Alonso? They can. Can the Mets sign Juan Soto? Yeah. Can they sign Juan Soto and Alex Bregman? They can. Can they sign Juan Soto and Willy Adames? They can. Can they sign Juan Soto and insert player that you want or you think they should sign in this free agent market with him? The answer is yes. And I don't think that there's another team out there that can boast that, not even the Yankees. The Yankees are paying Garrett Cole a $300 million contract. The Yankees are paying Aaron Judge a $300 million contract. They're paying Giancarlo Stanton a $300 million contract. They're paying Carlos Rodon an absurd amount of money. They're paying all these people so much money. So the Yankees' whole plan is going to be like, hey, well, we made it to the World Series with this team, so we'll bring you back. We'll get in some other pieces. The Yankees are going to sign some other pieces to fill in holes, but it's not going to be a dramatic reshaping. The Mets can pair Soto with Lindor and Nimmo and young talent like Alvarez and Vientos and more young talent coming through the pipeline, regardless of what everybody thinks of those players. There are prospects that are going to come up, and they can also still go out and buy 2 or 3 more players to pair with Juan Soto. Nobody else can do that. I think being on the East Coast, I think being in New York is a priority because I think he wants to be closer to home, relatively speaking. And I also think that concept of going back to the Yankees is going to matter less in terms of if he gets a deal in hand. Yamamoto wanted to go to the Dodgers. Period. Full stop. He wanted to play with Ohtani. He would have taken the money from the Mets had the Dodgers not matched it. But his agent is also not Scott Boras. He's also not trying to make the most money. And there was a peak. However high it was, there was a peak on the leverage that Yamamoto had. Soto does not have a peak on the leverage. So if Cohen offers him $650 million and he takes that offer to the Yankees and the Yankees say, sure, if you're Scott Boras, why don't you just turn around and say, all right, Juan, why don't we take this back to the Mets and see if he'll make it 700? Because Cohen is chomping at the bit. Eventually, I think it just comes down to money, and I think it comes down to the fact that Cohen will not be outbid, period.
I mean, we'll see how high it does go. We did see a rumor come out that was not legit, and it looked like it was basically fake. We're not going to acknowledge who gave it. I'm pretty sure some people are talking about it in the chat. But the rumors regarding, everybody believes that they have sources and they are connected to everyone. But when it comes to, the offer, there was a report that came out, was not verified whatsoever, was verified that was false, that the Mets offered Juan Soto $660 million on the table in their meeting yesterday or the day before. And to me, I'm glad that was proven wrong in that sense. I don't think that there were any offers. Most likely the opening meetings, there is not going to be an offer, especially with a Scott Boras type of negotiation where he just goes back and forth. But when it comes to, Juan Soto, I am kind of relieved in the sense that they did not make an offer to him, because I personally believe that if $660 million were on the table, it's possible that Cohen, in that sense, was expecting Soto to just sign right then and there. And I feel like that's the kind of the feeling that you get if he automatically makes an offer that early. I think that there is a team that possibly would match it, such as the Yankees would try to match it. I do think that the Mets would eventually outbid them. But when it comes to Scott Boras, I just don't know how to feel. I've always just continued to be very pessimistic in a lot of these things with Scott Boras, because there's just never a safety blanket for me when it comes to this guy. Always seems like he just, makes that last turn. Maybe he goes to the highest bidder. Maybe he goes to the highest bidder in a higher AAV. Maybe he goes to the highest bidder in more years. I'm not 100% confident that the Mets will 100% land Juan Soto if he goes to the highest bidder. Again, and of course my camera wants to start doing this again. But again, I believe that at some point I need to have some kind of a confirmation by somebody, of somebody of continues of substance, where it's not just like, okay, well, the Mets have money and they can give all that money to Juan Soto. Right now, still with the Yankees being in there and being the team that he is currently on and was on, I still, at this current moment, and it could change at any point, and I'm pretty sure I said this, 2 weeks ago, right now I still feel like a leverage horse. That's all I feel like in regards to how the Mets are in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. And it could change. I'm just saying, but what I'm saying is I need this to go a little bit deeper in before I'm like, okay, Juan Soto's a Met. He's 100% going to the highest bidder, because you never know what's going on in Scott Boras's mind of how he wants to rearrange this thing and what team Juan Soto prefers, because that really has not been specified either. So, I don't know if that's the feeling that you guys get in any way. I think the confidence level has risen since 2 weeks ago when I said that. But again, I think that there are still possibilities that he does go back to the Yankees. I do think there is, possibilities as to where you have, bidding wars that maybe it'll feel like the Mets are just being jerked around in this sense, as to where, maybe because if it goes past the winter meetings, then I'm going to start to get a little bit frustrated in that point.
I don't think that's crazy. I think it's possible the Mets are being used for leverage. I think I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that the Mets get him. I wouldn't say like write it down right now. But for me, I just don't. I think Cohen is willing to go to a place that the Steinbrenners are not. That's what it comes down to for me, because eventually, use me as leverage all you want, but then what happens when I make you an offer you can't say no to, or you take back to the other guys and they're like, I can't do it. And, I cited all the big contracts the Yankees already have, and I cited the ability for the Mets to go out and spend beyond that. I think the plan matters, but I think ultimately the money matters. So maybe right now you're right. They kind of are being used for leverage, but I don't care, because I think Cohen is willing to go past. And Frank, you said something before about the Mets plan with Soto and the Mets plan without Soto. I think it's a little different from what we saw last year with the Mets plan with Yamamoto potentially and without Yamamoto. And I know this is crazy to say for a guy who is going to make as much money as Soto is, regardless of where he signs. But I just think that the money he's going to get is kind of something that you kind of write off if you're the owner of the team. I think Ibby was kind of talking about this before, where it's just like, hey, you know what? This is the guy that we want to get. We'll go get this guy. And then after that, whatever happens, happens. Let's go. We know we have to go out and get more players. I think Soto is so important to this franchise moving forward as a piece to go get, that it's almost like, yeah, we get him and then that's sorted. We got that guy. And then we go out from there, because apart from needing a different outfielder, if you don't get him, the Mets are still going to have to figure out what to do at first base. They're still going to have to figure out if they want Willy Adames. They're still going to have to figure out where they want to play Mark Vientos and all of that stuff. They're still going to have to do a bunch of other moves, and they're going to have to fill out a rotation, most notably. So, you know, good.
Yeah, to the point that John was making before about, you know, the way that, Christ, I just lost my spot. No, with the way that everything is setting up. Fuck, I lost my spot. Come back to me. I'll figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I kind of look at it is, to me, my initial thought with Juan Soto was always like, okay, I 100% will 100% pursue him and be the highest bidder. But if we end up not getting him, that's fine, because we can build a little bit more of a deeper team. There's other guys out there that can kind of fill those little gaps as well, to make that team. Then you also get that little thought in your head where you're like, okay, wait a minute. Let's say you get Juan Soto. Most likely, considering the total value of this contract, you're going to have some deferred payments. And we all know that Juan Soto is definitely going to look at it as to where he wants to win. He's young. He wants to, have a legacy throughout his entire career. He already has a World Series, of course, that he won back in Washington as even younger of a player on that big stage. But you also see it as, maybe it becomes like, I don't know, $50 million a year in AAV, but somehow it, like, with deferred payments, it becomes like $35 million. Maybe it's $38 million, like something like that might bring it a little bit lower to where they can bring in a little bit more talent. And that's where I feel like it goes to John in that sense, where he said, there is a possibility where you can bring in Soto and retain somebody like Pete Alonso, and maybe bring in somebody like Corbin Burns and Soto. It's possible. You're going to need a lot of dominoes to fall in that sense, but I'm just saying that there's a strong possibility the Mets can work it around as to where, Juan Soto gets, his 25-year contract that, Magic Johnson got from the Lakers back in the 80s. They can figure things out in that way to move things around. I mean, it's not like it's illegal. The Dodgers set the market on that. They set the table on that. We're just following that in that way. And if you want to be the East Coast Dodgers, that's something that the West Coast Dodgers seem to really, really emphasize and piss us all off last offseason with regarding contract deferrals.
The one thing I was going to say, I figured it out finally. What John was saying before about something we mentioned a lot on our show, and that was, when Soto turned down that much money as a 23-year-old. I think when someone does something like that, it's bold. Knowing it's bold, and it's knowing your worth and saying, no, when it's time, I'm really going to cash in. So whether those reports are real or not, I don't believe the reports, but if you are going to offer that much money, the whole idea here is you are going to force this person to go against what that initial 23-year-old basically said. You're going to force him to say no, and actually leaving money on the table. So then people can come back to that tweet that I said and say, you were wrong. You're going to force this guy to leave $50 million on the table, $60 million on the table. Now, the reason why it was such a big deal last offseason with Yamamoto and everything, I said to John, I go, if the Mets want him, they got to outbid the Dodgers by $50 million. And the rumor came out that the Dodgers weren't going to go higher than $275. And then what happens? The Mets go to $325. The Dodgers say, whatever, we'll match it. Good. You gave me what I wanted. And then you end up losing the guy because they ended up having to go to that point. I do not believe, and this is why I question, and I'll throw it back to you, Carson. Like you're saying, you believe that they are a stalking horse. Do you think that is for the Yankees? So do you actually believe that the Yankees will go to a number that nearly matches what the Mets are willing to go to? Do you believe that they would go that far?
I think my full thought is that with David Stearns, who likes to build a full roster, I feel like if it continues to drag out the way Scott Boras has dragged things out before that time frame of the winter meetings, then I would start to get a little bit frustrated in that way as to where, oh, well, we're just going to keep raising $25 million back and forth, and there's going to be an outbid that hopefully he goes to, but at one point it's going to end because of the frustration that you're going to get from somebody like David Stearns, who wants to make a lot of moves. And we know he makes a lot of transactions year round, even after the off season and into the season.
My one thing here is, look, I want David Stearns. I trust Stearns. I want Stearns making the calls. I don't want Cohen making the calls for player personnel. However, when a 26-year-old all-time player, and that's what he's been so far, is a free agent, I think you have to remember that Stearns works for Cohen. And if Cohen wants him, Stearns has got to sit down and have the conversation that you just had with us with Cohen. And that's to say, look, you've entrusted me to make this team and you've entrusted me to do it in my way and my image and all that stuff. But I will go out and sign whichever players you want me to sign, as long as you're giving me the guarantee that it's not going to tighten the purse strings elsewhere. We already know that this is going to cost over $500 million, probably closer to $750 million. If that is something that you, worth $21 billion, are willing to do, that's great. And I will go to whatever lengths to get that done, but it can't affect what we're trying to do. What you said yourself that you were trying to do, which is build a sustained winner, win a World Series within 3 to 5 years, all that kind of stuff that you've talked about. We can't let this be the move. And that's why I think I don't think that it comes down to Stearns in that sense, because you can't just sit there and treat Juan Soto like he's any other free agent. He's not any other free agent. There's not going to be a $700 million player next year or the year after or the year after that. And there's probably not going to be a $700 million player that you're in the market for, with all that considered anyway, because you can't sign all of them. I know there was just one last year with Ohtani, but this is stuff that doesn't happen all the time. You're not going to reset the market in terms of this kind of dollar value every single year. So I don't know that it matters. I don't know if it should. If Cohen is everything that he wants to be and says he is, I don't think it should matter. I think you should pony up a small chunk of your massive fortune and get the thing done if that's what you really want.
Yeah, this is the way that I kind of look at it, is where I just get very, I see it going so many different ways because of the guy at the helm. And that's the main reason as to why with Scott Boras, the Scott Boras spiral that you go through regarding these types of negotiations. And I feel like in the back of my mind, I do have this feeling as to where he's going to put his tactics to an extreme with a guy like Juan Soto. And I don't know, there's a possibility as to where this elevates a little bit more and makes it a little bit more stressful. And then once it gets to that high stress point, let's say the Mets don't end up getting somebody like Soto, it will probably put everybody in a distraught move in that way. And everything else that they do, it'll just feel like, the next plan B. And obviously it will be the plan B, of course, if they do miss out on him. I just feel like right now we're entering that stress point of a Scott Boras of what, the web that he wants you to step into. And maybe it's just the fact that I'm dreading it because we're at the beginning here and it's like that big journey that you have to go through regarding Scott Boras. But I feel like when you come to an agreement between a Scott Boras client and another team, I mean, let's not forget how, a lot of historic stuff has happened under Scott Boras, he has definitely broken a lot of records regarding contracts and a lot of things that were craziness going on. Not to mention, I mean, we're not even talking about the Alex Rodriguez contract or any of these other things that he got in the past, but even recently, the Carlos Correa situation, that was the most unusual situation that we saw. I'm not saying that Juan Soto has an ankle issue or whatever, but I feel like there are tactics that are just going to that could possibly make this exhausting. And I don't know if somebody like David Stearns, who likes to make a lot of transactions, likes to take everything into account, I'm very unsure about the patience regarding the Juan Soto sweepstakes with the Mets. And that's where I feel like not really they would come up short, but it's just a concern of mine as to where maybe there just is a little bit more butting heads as compared to somebody like Scott Boras negotiating with somebody like not even just Steve Cohen or somebody like David Stearns, who likes to make all these transactions and putting all those chips into one basket. It just, I don't know. I don't know how that's going to play
Better have
out.
the patience. You bet. I mean, I like Stearns and I think he's the right guy for the job, but this is big boy free agency, man. If you don't have the patience, you better go somewhere else. And I'm not saying I want him out. I love Stearns. I think he's the right guy, but you got, I see what you're saying, Carson, but like, that's I'm not saying you're reinforcing it, but your fear is what people are saying about Stearns, which is he's a small market GM. I mean, not in so many ways. That's what you're saying. My fear is
more about Scott Boras, to be honest, because I just he's such a wild horse that like, no one's going to like, I mean, year after year, I mean, not even just with the stuff that this guy says or whatever, where he's just nuts. But when it comes to somebody like Scott Boras, it's not going to turn into like the Boras 4 towards like the end of the offseason as to where it was Chapman and Montgomery and Snell. It's not going to turn into that. But I feel like with a player like this in Juan Soto, I do feel like there is a chance that it does hold up a lot. And maybe it might bring in some frustration. Maybe it's just my frustration and David Stearns is willing to wait that out because we have seen him be patient and not really jump on things. Let's not forget how he signed somebody like JD Martinez towards the end there. He was very patient regarding his contract. But there's something about where Scott Boras running this still just makes me feel just not really like not just completely pessimistic, but I'm just saying that there's something about Scott Boras that makes me just never feel safe. And I know that seems like just one thing that anybody can say, but there always seems to be a curveball regarding a Boras client, regarding a top Boras client. I don't know if this is the feeling. Like Frank, you haven't actually talked for a while, actually. I mean, what is that sort? I mean, do you have that sort of feeling? Like, I don't know if I'm just the pessimistic type when it comes to that. And I try to be a little bit cautious as to where playing both sides. But I can't trust a Scott Boras client will just magically fall into my hands no matter how much effort that we put out there to get him.
Yeah, I mean, I'll point out what Subway Deshae mentions in the comments about the Mets signing Scott Boras clients under Cohen. I mean, even though these acquisitions didn't work out, think of Max Scherzer. I mean, that was something that, we weren't really sure how that was going to go. We thought maybe he was using us as leverage. He had just came from the Dodgers and the Mets were able to acquire him. Now, Juan Soto is a special case for multiple reasons. But I think what you have to look at here is the actual suitors that are available, like the teams that we talked about, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, whatever. Toronto has been in on a lot of players lately, and have they gotten everybody? They got Springer, they got a guy here or there. But when we're talking about this Juan Soto market of maybe a $600 million plus contract, I don't see the Blue Jays doing that. I don't take the Red Sox seriously after they traded away Mookie Betts due to financial concerns when he was their guy. So I don't see the Red Sox as a serious threat. So if you're telling me it's Mets versus Yankees and we get into a bidding war, and should the Yankees match it, or could the Yankees match it? I would say maybe they could, but they probably shouldn't because they already had Juan Soto and weren't good enough. And the Yankees need a first baseman and need a second baseman. And the pitching that they committed to, like they have Stroman for a few more years, he was not in their playoff rotation. Like they have their own issues that they still need to sort out while retaining Juan Soto. So it's not as simple as just like these bidding wars. The Yankees like, oh, we're just a Juan Soto away. Whereas the Mets, who knows? I mean, they're just in a totally different situation. I mean, there's a lot of things that are clicking in the right time for the Mets with Juan Soto. You have to remember, Juan Soto is a 26-year-old free agent because of how good he was in the minor leagues. He debuted at age 19 because he only needed 8 games of AA. The guy didn't even need AAA. That's why he's a free agent so early, because of his arbitration years. Now you have to consider how open the Mets payroll is with how few contracts they have committed, especially long-term. Marte, gone next year. McNeil could be gone 2 years from now. You're talking about Lindor at a $34 million contract. Then you have Nimmo at 20, Sang at 15 for a little bit, Diaz at 15 for a little bit. Like you have Juan Soto available at age 26 with a really nice future outlook of your payroll. Like there are so many things that are in the Mets' favor. That's why it's okay if Cohen wants to do a ridiculous overpay. This is the perfect time to do it for multiple reasons.
Frank, you're spot on with the contracts. I mean, I think if you want to talk about modern baseball in 2024, going into 2025 and into the future, the Mets have one big contract. It's Francisco Lindor. I don't consider Brandon Nimmo to be a big contract. You could argue that Diaz is a big contract for the position that he plays, but in the totality of your payroll, he's not. Senga is a close to a steal as you can have in the starting rotation. And so when you say that the Yankees shouldn't, it's an argument that I made along with couldn't the other day on our show, where I said on this, on this show, in my first comments, where the Yankees really can't go there and bring in other players. I said something similar. So I totally agree. I don't think if I was building a team and I'm running the Yankees, I'm looking at it and I'm going, I don't know that you should do this. I think the Mets are in the should category and could category. I think the Yankees are out on both of those very important thought experiments with regards to building a team in free agency.
Yeah, listen, I understand exactly, where everyone is coming from as to where it looks really good for the Mets. Again, it always will.
And most important thing, the Dodgers aren't actually involved. That's the other big factor. Like if the Dodgers were a legitimate threat, we're in trouble. But the fact that they're not, that also makes a huge difference. That's why they couldn't get Yamamoto. I mean, that's a huge reason.
Yeah.
Feinstein just came out saying their Dodgers are meeting with them as early as tomorrow.
And again, and that's where if a bidding war happens and you're Steve Cohen, that's where you really cannot have your offer not be the highest, especially with what just happened.
I don't know if it's real. I think the Dodgers have become the Yankees that we all grew up with, where they're in on everybody, but they don't necessarily go and get everybody. I think the Dodgers have just created a thing where they're like, we got to check in. We're the Dodgers, right? Like,
of course.
I don't think it's real.
And I think you're really by design. It's all by design. Like I just put it in the chat before, saying how you look at the meetings and the whole showing him around with these people, and it's all Yankee rivals. It's the Blue Jays, it's the Red Sox, it's the Mets. Now you're throwing in the Dodgers. It's all things to drive the price. And you want the Yankees to come up to create this back and forth that Boris definitely wants between specifically the Mets and Yankees, because he wants Cohen's money to go even higher. But the point I made in the chat, I don't think that they're going to match. And I will eat all the crow. If the Yankees actually get the balls and do what they should do and keep the guy. I just don't think they're going to go that high. I really don't. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, here's my deal with a lot of these big fish free agents, and I've never been one to be like, well, you gotta get them, you have to, no matter what, or it's a complete failure, and we should just give up the year if we don't get this sort of free agent. I've never been one to do that. I always like to have like an actual deep team. That's what gets you through. Obviously, Soto is a different situation. I would love to have Juan Soto. And if they get Juan Soto, I'll be happy as a clam. Are clams happy? I don't even know. But when it comes to, these types of processes of free agency, when it comes to these big pieces, one thing that I hate more than losing out on a free agent, one thing I hate more than that is being jerked around. And that's what I feel like is the biggest tendency that you could possibly get from somebody like Scott Boras, which is why I never feel comfortable with a Scott Boras client. And that's the main reason as to why I continue to be pessimistic about this whole thing, because I need to have something of substance. You know, maybe we just need an Andy Martino tweet to just say that this is official. I don't know, because that's what happened with Max Scherzer. I'm pretty sure he was the first one to announce it. Andrew, I'll go to you because you have been very, very silent, and you've been, you know, texting me a lot of disgusting things while. But I mean, what is your feeling around this? Is there a confidence level? I know that you like to speak big on here, but what is your feeling around, you know, the negotiations? Because it's still very early. Winter meetings aren't here yet. But, I mean, what's your 2 cents in the Soto sweepstakes as of right now?
Yeah, the crutch team, like I think we've kind of into it. The Mets are not the crutch team. The team's in Canada. That's always the crutch. Like, this is, again, it's always been Met Yankee. It's only going to be Met Yankee. Like, I think everybody's been saying, the Dodgers are just going to be in this to jack the price up even more. Like, they might put an offer on the table, but if they're not going to sign them, the two other big spenders, you know, notoriously, are Mets and the Yankees. It's the Dodgers, right? And they should be like, well, let me at least do a $48 million a year AAV just to put that out so the Mets and Yankees or have to top that. Just put that. And if we get them, sure, it's a bonus. You know, Teoscar Hernandez could probably be brought back, but hey, you know what? Juan Soto's better than Teo. I think the Dodgers would take that. But it's their right as that kind of big market team. If they're not going to sign them for real, jack that damn price up. And then the leverage play, which has been, again, they saw it last year. Like, being wheeled around. Shohei Ohtani was on a flight to Toronto. Remember that? And Blue Jays fans were planning the parade. They were always going, no one likes Canada. Your only thing Canada's good at is hockey. You're not getting any elite baseball players. Enough. You are the crutch of all crutches. They'll be like, oh, yeah, your money doesn't even count because it's all Canadian money. It doesn't count. But again, when it comes, it was always ever going to be Mets and Yankees. And again, I feel confident. I'm just tired of this meeting crap. And let everybody, and there'll be another round of meetings, and we're going to hear, well, this one went really what? They went to Shake Shack together this time, or they went to In-N-Out or Five, whatever the hell. I've had enough. I cannot wait to get to the winter meetings. I might be at the winter meetings. Hopefully this time I don't get thrown out again, but who knows? And if at least can I get there? Because I got thrown out before Stearns even showed up. I saw everybody else except Stearns, which is, of course, my luck. But again, I'm just waiting for that week in Dallas, and I'm not really caring anything unless Jeff Passan says it. So, like, I don't care what Heyman, Rosen... until Passan puts the bomb out, I really do not care how meetings and how they're eating. And, until Passan puts it out, I really don't give a shit. That's just me. I'm not going to be like, no. Until Passan says something, I really don't care.
I mean, I have a feeling of the upper hand of what's going on here as to where the Mets have that upper hand. Again, there's just something about Scott Boras that I just don't trust. And I think we all know what it is in his negotiation tactics, because he's just the generational type of guy, generational type of agent or whatever that has been able to negotiate these types of deals. And I mean, that's just the feeling I'll continue to have until it's signed on the dotted line. Now, we did also get something regarding Soto from Michael Kay, saying that he's heard from some baseball people that the Mets are willing to go $50 million over any top offer, no matter what, which, you know, it gives you somewhat confidence when it comes to hearing it from Michael Kay's mouth. Take it the way that you want. I do believe that, again, because like Ibby said in the beginning, like, you know, where we pointed it out, you know, this could be the player that Steve Cohen wants no matter what. And I mean, it could happen, because if you do land somebody like Juan Soto, you're not just landing a generational talent. Like we all know, this is a 26-year-old generational talent. So you are basically buying 10 years as to where you could possibly build a winning team with Juan Soto's potential prime. We saw Scott Boras say that he has 15 years of his prime. That's more of him just selling him off a lot more. But we all know how good Juan Soto is, no matter if Scott Boras says that. Rosie coming in saying Michael K said that Steinbrenner is worried about Cohen.
Should be.
He definitely should be with his deep wallet again. I mean, I don't know. I just hearing these things come in day by day. I feel like anything can change, and it gets very nerve-wracking, as all social media can continue to be with this type of news. And we continue to get a lot more sources that come in here as compared to what it was 20 years ago. But yeah,
I think there's one thing you just want to be careful of, like whether the $50 million thing, the $50 million more from the Mets report is real or not. I saw something on Twitter not that long ago that said, like, over 15 years, $50 million is only $3.3 million. It's not that big of a deal. $50 million is $50 million is $50 million is $50 million.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. It's a lot of money. Sometimes, the AAV conversations go both ways. You're like, oh, you really got to make up for it in AAV, or like spread out. It's not that much money. It's a lot of money. In this case, the $3.3 million annual, it's $50 million. He's going to be 40 years old in the prime of his existence with an extra $50 million in his pocket. It's a lot of money, guys. Like, I know baseball money feels like monopoly money when we talk about it, but like you got to acknowledge the fact that is an astronomical amount of money.
It's ridiculous. It's the amount of money that I don't think anybody in the chat will get anywhere near, like, not even just yearly overall, unless, they luck into the mega millions or whatever. But, when it comes to, how these things are negotiated, I do think that you can get this feeling as well regarding Pete Alonso, as well regarding Scott Boras, where maybe he becomes a Boras 4 towards the end, as to where his negotiations kind of fall out a little bit, and maybe he'll be out there on the market for a while. So I don't think we have seen, I don't know, is there been a team that has signed 2 Boras clients in the same offseason before? I have to know if that is a way that has happened, because maybe it was the Yankees who did it once. I
don't know, but the one that everybody points to, what about the 2009 offseason for the Yankees, where they got Burnett, Sabathia, and Teixeira? Were 2 of those guys Boras guys? I don't know.
It was Teixeira. I think Teixeira was a Boras guy.
Teixeira was. Yeah. I don't know about the other 2.
Burnett seems like one, but let me look.
Yeah, it just feels possible when you sign basically the 3 best free agents in the class. It feels crazy that Boras didn't represent at least 2 of them, but I don't know, honestly, because he does like to spread it around, because the theory is that his guys will get more money going to different places, right? Because how many $300 million contracts or $150 million, whatever, how many of those can one team sign in one offseason? Usually not that many, usually not more than 1 in most instances. So the theory is to spread it around, because he knows that each guy will get more money, therefore he'll get more money. But you know what? If it's going to be like one of those off seasons like 2009, and I think it will be for the Mets, I've been saying that this whole time, I think the Mets are going to get 2, if not 3 big free agents, then, it's very possible that this is the year it happens.
I mean, we'll see what happens, because again, we've had this circle
Burnett,
on our calendar for a while.
Burnett and Teixeira.
So the Yankees were probably the last ones to do that, and it's possible that maybe the Mets do that with the the luxury tax space that they do have. They have a lot of money coming off the books. They're in position to do that, and I think that when it comes to Juan Soto, and then obviously maybe adding on Pete Alonso in general with that. His market is obviously going to be a lot different, because of the first baseman market, even though it's not as deep. You have Christian Walker out there, who we talked about in our video last week, me and Andrew, of guys that we would prefer to avoid and more move things around of constructing the roster. Now,
can I ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
That I asked Ibby on our show. I'm curious to know what the 3 of you guys think about this. So I asked him, but I posed it to him with my thought. if the Mets aren't going to bring back Alonso, I would rather sign Carlos Santana on a 1-year deal than Christian Walker to anything more than a 1-year deal. So I would rather have a 40-year-old Carlos Santana for 1 year than Christian Walker on a multiple year deal. Do you guys agree or disagree?
I mean, Frank, what do you think? Is that
Yeah,
something
I mean,
you would do?
I'm in the same boat with Walker. I think that anytime, because my thing with Alonso is that if I didn't get Alonso, let's say Soto's not involved, but it would be because of term. It'd be because of years. I'm like, oh, I don't want to pay a guy into age 37, whatever. Meanwhile, Christian Walker, you're basically paying everything 35 and above if you go multi-year. So your reason for not getting Alonso should not be that your reason to sign Christian Walker. It just feels very counterproductive. So I'm okay with any other scenario, honestly. Like, yeah, I'm not even okay with no Santana. I'm okay with give me Vientos, let Acuna play, let Mauricio play, and like we've talked about a Moncada, an Urshela, or whatever, just for now, and then just kind of see what happens, and then focus on pitching. Since if I didn't get Soto and I didn't get Alonso, I'm going all in on pitching. Like Corbin Burns is mine, maybe Snell on a short term. Like I'm going crazy on pitching and just seeing what happens, because to me, if let's say any of these other teams make another big move, like the Mets need more pitching to compete. I keep saying it, but when you're in the playoffs and you're giving up 10 runs, 8 runs, 9 runs, it's hard to win like that. It's impossible. So you got to lower that run total. They need to get better in the pitching department. So if they don't have an Alonso or a Soto and they're not going crazy there, then I'm not going to do it elsewhere. I mean, there's just, and I don't see Stearns doing that either. He's not going to overpay for guys who are not worth it. So I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the Mets kind of just be put into that type of market as to where there's these pivots to the top guy. We know that Alonso is the top for first baseman on the market right now, but then there's also Christian Walker. To me, it kind of just looks like the Realmuto McCann dilemma of who is debating that. I'm not saying that Christian Walker is ever going to be McCann, because I think Christian Walker is a lot better of a player than that. But what I'm saying is that when you look at Christian Walker in this free agency, and I know there are a lot of people that have been in our chat that have talked about maybe him as a possible Alonso replacement. To me, again, first baseman, it should not be spent big, and it has to be a big cornerstone looking at it for somebody like Christian Walker, or if it's Pete Alonso, who's been a cornerstone to this franchise, whether he has regressed or not, or whether you don't think he's going to produce this way or not. If you're anti-Alonso, you want him to go. He's been a cornerstone to this franchise for 6 years, no matter what, if you agree to him staying or not. And if they do bring him back, it makes sense as to why they would. But then you look at the first baseman market, you see Mark Vientos is viable. I mean, I definitely would. I personally would sign Carlos Santana, mainly just because of the overall value that you would get. Not just really just like penny pinching in that way, but I'm just saying the overall, the value that you get from both sides. I'm not saying that he is the perfect fit, and I'm not saying it's a last resort either. But when it comes to somebody like Carlos Santana, he's been established. At any point, he could fall off because he's almost 40 years old. But again, this is someone who, can be a 20 to 25 home run bat, was a 3-win player last year, and also one of the best defensive first basemen in all of baseball. And, whether you think Pete Alonso is a serviceable defender or not, or whether you think Pete Alonso is not a good defender and you believe that he should just be a DH for a majority of his career, Carlos Santana, by a huge margin, is one of the best defensive first basemen. And again, you never know if you're going to be putting somebody like Mark Vientos at third base. If the throws go wild, you're going to need somebody backing it up there. I would consider definitely doing that if Pete Alonso were to walk, because then you also can address other things, on your team, like the pitching staff in that regard.
That was my point of posing the question, because I think the Mets, to be successful, to compete with the big lineups in the National League, the Mets need to sign Soto and Alonso. That's been my stance since day one. I think they need to have a deeper lineup, a more powerful lineup. I don't think, obviously Soto is better, and if you ask me who do I want, one or the other, and I can only have one, I'd rather have Soto. But I think the Mets need both kinds of players. But to your point before about Stearns pivoting to Christian Walker, who, like Frank said, is 4.5 years older than Pete already, and did most of that in a hitter's haven, and did most of that late in his career. To me, that does not feel like a Stearns move. Then just pay Alonso. So I think a Stearns move is, well, you know what? We'll get Santana. No such thing as a bad one-year deal. We'll run with that, and then we can fill out the roster in other spots, knowing that we do have Soto.
And the biggest thing that everyone always says when it comes to Walker is, oh, he's a 10 times better defender than Pete. Well, it's like, well, as Armand just brought up in the chat, it's like, well, this guy, even though he's 38, you can get him for 1 year, 21 homers, 71 RBIs. I just put in the chat, according to Savant, his expected home runs would have been 25, which would have been third, if it was at City. So having that, and he won a Gold Glove. So you're talking so much about Walker as a better defender. Well, then just take the cheaper guy with just as good numbers, and then allow yourself to spend in other areas. It doesn't make sense. And if he has the qualifying offer attached to him as well, which is going to turn down, you're not giving him the pick either. So I don't see how Walker makes any sense at all for this team.
That's another good point. Could you imagine giving up a pick? I don't care what the money is, and I know draft picks or whatever, but if you could just sign Alonso and you're going to give up a pick to sign Christian Walker, like, to me, that is like penny smart, dollar foolish. It doesn't make sense to me. I know Alonso's deal will be longer and will be for more money than Christian Walker, but when you think about giving up the pick, when you think about a guy who's never played in New York, and you think about, it's like, why just sign Alonso? What? Just sign Alonso. It makes so much more sense.
And I think another concern when you sign a guy who's 34, you think about health. Let's not forget Christian Walker finished the year with an oblique injury, something that P. Alonso has never had. He's never had a hamstring. He's never had an oblique or anything like that. So Christian Walker's already giving you signs that his body is on the decline. So why would you sign a long-term deal when the guy's already showing his health is going the wrong way? And a couple more things about Santana. He's a good fit. You guys mentioned in the video the high on base percentage, which is something this team could use with their tendency to chase with the bases loaded. Santana doesn't do that. And the fact that switch hitter, give you a little bit more, we say a little right-handed heavy. There's no lefty in your lineup, which Christian Walker also right-handed. So there's just multiple reasons why Santana is the better fit. But I just think overall the Walker thing, I have never really been into it, but I don't think so. I think if you want 1 year deal, fine.
Sure.
Anything more than one, no way.
And you add to the fact that Pete Alonso played in all 175 of the games that the Mets played. The best ability is availability. That is true. It is true. It is true. And you're going to give up on that guy for a guy who is 4.5 years older, who, like you said, had a potentially, kind of debilitating injury that will kind of creep back up. Usually you start getting obliques. You don't stop getting obliques as you get older. So, yeah, all great points.
I mean, I'm looking at it right now with Santana, dead pole hitter, so I'll take it. I mean,
not until Eric Chavez gets it. Wait a minute, I got an idea for you, Carlos. How do you like the opposite field? I have some ideas
little poke the other way. Nice little poke.
Will be, that will be the way that the Mets will ruin him, and he'll just age into oblivion. But that's something else that you can look at going forward. But Andrew, I'll go to you. I mean, I know that you really are one of the biggest fans of Pete Alonso. You always have been, and you've always been someone to say that he's one of your biggest buddies known to man. I'm kidding. It's the exact opposite. But Carlos Santana, would you put him on your radar before Christian Walker as a possible replacement?
I mean, yeah, it definitely is a financial benefit. Like, and if you're telling me you're going after Burns and you're going up, then I'll take the offensive downgrade power-wise and cheaper to go for Santana. If you're telling me, you're going in Burns, you're in Snell, you're in that, okay. But if you're telling me that, okay, this is the straight-up Alonso replacement and he's going to, let's say, bring back Minaya and Severino, then I think we're going to have a conversation like, okay, then no. But if we're just talking strictly a Christian Walker versus Carlos Santana for like 1 year, $5 million compared to like 3 years, probably going to be $17 a year at minimum, probably for what Walker's going to do. Again, it's cheap, it's an option, and it gives you, again, what we always say, it's you could still maybe if you go out and you put him at first, you can move Vientos to DH, and let's say you bring another defensive first corner outfield, or maybe an upgraded power guy for third. It's an option. It's never a bad thing to have better options as a veteran leader. But again, him being 40, but again, the difference with Walker's aging, Santana's keeping this up as he ages. So at least we know like Santana's aging and still being the same. We don't know what that question mark is of Christian Walker. So again, if you're telling me if Alonso's walking, which he would like him back, but if he has to go get overpaid by somewhere else, and if you're telling me it's Walker or Santana, I'll take Santana.
Yeah. I mean, I think if building in team construction, it makes a lot more sense to go with somebody like that. I mean, I know that Santana isn't, the top of what he was at one point, but he still is a very productive hitter. And even if he does end up going down, you still have these other options where maybe you put Mark Vientos at first. I know a lot of people are high on Ryan Clifford going forward, so maybe the short-term bridge option is something that you look at. You never know if he's going to be a prospect that hits. But if you also want to put that gateway to somebody like Ryan Clifford or the young guys, which we have seen Stearns already do regarding some of the outfield picks that he has had, with Drew Gilbert, and then there's some of these pieces, these little infield pieces that they brought in to maybe give the leeway to somebody like, with Beatty at the beginning of the season. There also was, a chance for Mark Vientos to play third base in AAA. So we've seen them bring these stopgap pieces in to not block out anybody. Again, if they were to end up bringing back Alonso, which I think is on, the top of Alonso's list, I think the Mets are still currently the favorite to retain Alonso and be on Alonso's market. I do have also a thought with me, and I have said this already. After the year that he did redeem himself in the postseason. I do think that he's been a huge piece to this franchise for 6 years now. But then you also look at this free agency market. You look at the future of what the Mets are looking at with their farm system, of how far that they are going right now, and how they're trying to build this thing from top to bottom. I still have the thought of like, okay, you know what? I'm good with Alonso, and I'm also good without him. Like, I am good with either direction for it. And like John, what you just said regarding, to compete with some of these guys, with some of these teams in the NL East, compete with maybe possibly the Dodgers, who they just lost to in the National League Championship Series. Soto plus Alonso can definitely give you a formula to compete with those types of offenses. I do think that there are some bats out there that you could maybe complement with somebody like Soto that isn't Pete Alonso, like that guy Anthony Santander, who I think is really good. Frank loves that guy Teoscar Hernandez out there, and we will actually have a little bit of a topic on that in a second. But, I mean, when it comes to how they're looking at this on the market, we know that Soto is the main centerpiece of where they possibly pivot to next. But I do believe that they have that flexibility because of how ridiculous this contract is going to be for Juan Soto no matter what. They could arrange things around, be like the Dodgers, like I said, with deferred payments to maybe bring you a little bit more space and more ways to maneuver in that way. I mean, let's not also forget, they brought in JD Martinez on a 1-year deal. They have deferred payments with him as well from like 2031 to 2035 or something like that. It's not crazy. They deferred money with Edwin Diaz as well. I mean, there's some things of deferred money that get off the luxury tax that they could possibly do. And I do think that there is going to be that type of restructure with the contract. And, there could be a view as to where maybe they do that. Hopefully it's not just this fully guaranteed. Again, we still saw Shohei Ohtani, who's not represented by Scott Boras. We have seen some Scott Boras clients get fully guaranteed from the Mets. Max Scherzer got the fully guaranteed. We were paying that last year. Brendan Nimmo, fully guaranteed $162 million. Again, they're not the caliber of Juan Soto, but we'll see if he'd be willing to do those types of deferred payments. Because again, we'll see what happens. But yearly, I mean, I still would want to, continue in that regard. To maybe empty some of that space. That they do have to consider that deferred payment type of thing, even though they have the flexibility of Steve Cohen sustaining it in that way to build around Soto. I feel like it would be a lot better if you can bring that down to a 38 million AAV. Maybe it's a 40 million AAV. Like, I feel like they do need a little bit of that flexibility for Stearns to do his thing and build a big roster around Soto, and it's not just top heavy like the Yankees were. And I'm not bashing the Yankees, because listen, I have more hatred for the Mets than the Yankees personally. The Mets will continue to just bother me the day that I die until they win a World Series. But with the Yankees, for a majority of their season, it was Judge and Soto. Like, that was it. That was the whole team. You had Garrett Cole hurt for a majority of the season. I want them to build a 26-man roster that is capable of winning. Juan Soto brings your chances up, but there's also other pieces on the team that they also have to add. And Juan Soto, we know, can't pitch. Mets need pitching as well. So, and maybe he does play first base at one point, because I think some people were suggesting that Soto should play first base for us if we bring him over, because he's not that great at right field.
Gold Glove finalist.
The one thing I do not subscribe to, if the Mets don't bring back Alonso and the thought is to move Soto to first base, whether it's immediately or in a year or whatever, so they get a stopgap player, fine. I'll entertain all of that. The one thing I'm not okay with is signing a 26-year-old player and making him the DH, as some people have asserted. That is insane to me. And I just look across town to the Yankees. Giancarlo Stanton was 29 years old when the Yankees got him. He got there, he became a full-time DH, and he turned 39 years old. I don't know what happened to that guy. I know he was an injury guy before that, but he got slow. He got unathletic. They tried to put him back in the outfield. He couldn't do it. He's still not even that old. He got there and he got so old so fast. And I think that putting him at DH at 26 years old is absolutely insane. If you want to move him to first base in a couple of years, I will entertain that concept. But man, oh man, just be like, oh, just make him a DH. Like, this is not MLB The Show. I think that is crazy. I think it's dumb.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Soto, again, he is in the prime of his career right now. And not to mention, more of the Stanton DH talks have really just come from more injuries than not just him just completely aging no matter what. There also was the positional swap where, Bryce Harper got $330 million or whatever. He moves over to first base, but yes, he's into his 30s as of right now, but he also had an injury that prevented him to go there. We haven't seen Soto get banged up in anywhere. And listen, he's a lot younger in that case, and hopefully, nothing bad happens regarding him down the line, especially if the Mets were to sign him. But when it comes to something like, Juan Soto or, going after Pete Alonso and retaining him, I think that they are going to try and work things around as to where they can still build a deep roster. I trust Stearns to do that. Again, there still is some concerns as to where I think they're going to go into different directions that seem to be a pivot that maybe I wouldn't do. I would trust somebody like David Stearns to figure that out. But I feel like there are a lot of pieces that need to fall regarding Soto. And speaking of those types of pieces and, those types of discussions that we could possibly have regarding that, I do want to play, a few rounds of Would You Rather with the offseason of what we would rather do. Now, I am going to be running this segment. There was supposed to be somebody else running this segment, but he just wanted to be a whiny little bitch about it. But anyways, we're basically just going to give pretty much a relatable, related topic of this offseason regarding the Mets of what they would do. And, we'll do a little bit of an explanation regarding our reasoning. I feel like these are as polarizing as they can get. Maybe they're a little bit easier for some people. You guys can let us know in the chat what you would rather do. But the first thing I do want to start off with is, of course, the pitching market, which we know that does have a lot of, it does have it's a very deep market. You have Burns out there. You have some brand names out there. But as for when it comes to the rotation, I think that there are two lefties that can be definitely debated in a certain way of term or AV, something like that. And I would like to talk about it in general with somebody like Sean Manaea or Blake Snell. And I do want to talk about who would you rather give a 4-year contract to? Because I think that this is a little bit, it's a little bit polarizing in the fact that you just don't know what you're going to get from a long-term deal, such as Blake Snell. Then you also have Sean Manaea, who comes off of a career year. You don't know what you're going to get afterwards. But maybe he's also in the primal years of his career, reinventing his game. You just don't really know in the sense of that, because none of them have really showed the desire for something such as a 4-year contract. I guess just at hard value, you would just say it's a guaranteed 4 years, hard 4 years, somebody like Sean Manaea or Blake Snell. So would you rather give a 4-year deal, a 4-year guaranteed deal to Blake Snell, or a 4-year guaranteed deal to Sean Manaea? Frank, I will start with you. What would be your decision if you had to make the call?
So between those two guys, I'm going Manaea. I think that my one concern with Manaea was the age, but Blake Snell's only a year younger, so I'm not going to let that be the deciding factor. And I will take what Manaea did as a Met as something that if I'm trying to decide between two guys, like Manaea, we already know what he could provide as a Met. Blake Snell, we're not so sure. And I have a couple concerns with Blake Snell as it relates to the Mets. Number one, I've mentioned this before, but Blake Snell every now and then can lose the strike zone, have a little bit of a walk problem.
Yeah.
We've seen this Mets team have way too many walk problems as it is. And I think if you are a pitcher and walks are a concern, this is not the organization for you that's going to make that better. It might make it worse. So I don't think this is a great fit just with the current coaching staff the Mets have. But number two, I think with Blake Snell's personality, I could see it being if he has, like kind of Andrew mentioned with Jack Flaherty, like if he has some bad starts and the media gets on him, I wonder how that whole dynamic would go. Meanwhile, with Manaea, he's a great guy. We know everything checks out there. So I just think it's a much safer bet to have Manaea for the 4 years than Snell.
Yeah, I mean, Snell, I'd say he is definitely polarizing. He's definitely a bigger voice, of course. He definitely talks a little bit more as compared to some other players. I have a little bit more of that concern with Jack Flaherty than Snell. But Andrew, where would you go regarding Snell or Manaea? Who do you think is a better 4-year investment?
Again, both of these aren't, again, 4 years aren't the greatest idea, but if I'm going to go with the guy who, I'm going Snell because of the change of the arm angle. Yes, we saw great success from Sean Manaea, which again, once he tweaked it, it was amazing. Cy Young, whatever, Chris Sale type, whatever. But again, this is a drastic change to a pitcher who's throughout his career has had some injury history. He was good with the Mets, with that crazy different altering to his delivery. That's just more of a willing or inflating the opportunity for injury, and I would rather have Snell, who has the track record of consistently being good, where Sean Manaea has been kind of peaks and valleys. He's had some good years. He's had some, yes, has still had a stinker or two, of course. He also has two Cy Youngs, which again doesn't mean a lot, award-wise, but still it's something that happened. And you've seen him go into stretches where he becomes one of the best pitchers in baseball. Can he do it throughout a 4-year deal? Sure. Again, the age thing. Manaea is going to be 33 when the season starts. Snell's going to be 32. So again, it's a year difference. But again, I'd rather go with the guy who has the more consistent track record and not the random outlier. Holy, this guy was one of the best pitchers in baseball for a half season, where Snell's done it a little more consistently throughout his career.
Ibby, I'll go to you. Is Manaea or Snell a better 4-year investment for you? What would you go with?
we've talked about Manaea on our show, and I've been very hesitant when it comes to him. When it comes to 4 years, I said I thought he would be able to stay with the Mets at 3. Beyond that, I would say, I appreciate the time that you were here, but bye-bye. That's the way I've kind of felt. And when you're asking to choose between these two, I would choose Snell. I think because of some of the things that Andrew just laid out before, doing it a little bit longer. I love the stuff that Snell has. Yes, to Frank's point before, the walks are a concern. And I mentioned on our show last week that the last thing this team needs is more walks. We have to try and, nip that because it was clearly a huge issue this past year. But if you're asking to choose between these two, I would pick him. And shout out to Daniel Wexler, who always puts out great stuff on Twitter. He put out some stuff today about Snell, specifically talking about how, when you're talking about a team that wants to compete over the next handful of years, you're going to have to face the Dodgers. And a player like Blake Snell's got 7 career starts at Dodger Stadium. He's got a 2.03 ERA with about 11 strikeouts per 9. He's got a 3.22 postseason ERA. I know, Carson, you love ERA so much. I'm going to keep on saying that. His numbers at Citi Field are strong as well. He's got good numbers at Citizens Bank Park. Colder weather places like Chicago, he's done well. He's averaged about 11 strikeouts per 9 in the playoffs, which ranks him around 11th in overall numbers for postseason pitchers since 2018. So it's something that this team wants. They want guys that can pitch within, at that next level where they're trying to get to where they want to be on a more consistent basis. I love what Sean Manaea has done. I am wary of him throwing 100, giving him a 4-year deal and him coming off of the most innings he's ever pitched at 190 plus. And I fear what's going to happen to him coming into next year. Is he going to be able to hold up? Is the arm going to snap or not? Like, I'm worried about that. And now you lose a year, or you lose a year and a half, potentially 2, into a 4-year deal as he tries to recover. Plus, you're talking about someone, yes, he made all those changes when it comes to his arm. Is that going to come back to bite him? I don't know. I would rather go with something that I know is more consistent. And yes, are there peaks and valleys with Blake Snell? Does he look like he's going to walk the park his entire season and then become the Cy Young winner because he's unstoppable for 2 months? Would I like to see more consistency there? Yes. But if I have to pick, I'm picking Snell all day.
MOC Baseball saying Snell doesn't have a walk problem. He talked about it, and it's been on MLB Breakdowns. His stuff is so good. Will rarely lay off 4 times in a row, and it's near the zone. Like, here's the thing. I disagree with that. I do think he does have a walk problem, but he does strike out a lot of batters to offset that, and I think that that's what kind of keeps him in that appealing range. To get a lot of swings and misses.
Of those top pitchers since 2018 in the postseason, when it comes to the walks per 9, number 1 on that is Blake Snell at 4.4, which is nearly double the next guys on the list.
John, I know you're a big Snell guy. I know that you've talked very highly of him. Snell or Manaea, if you'd give him a cold 4-year deal?
I'm going Snell. I see that seems to be the consensus here. I am a Snell guy. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Snell is, one of the best pitchers in baseball. And he's people have talked about how the Cy Youngs, they're not meaningless, but they certainly don't matter to the point of like, oh my God, look at this guy and his Cy Young trophy case. Right. But I do think he's a more sound investment. I do think over the 4 years, I would rather go with the guy who has just had a better career. I like Sean Manaea. I'm not as put off as Ibby about the 4th year for Sean. I would rather it be 3, but I think if you had to do it to 4 to get it done, I would. To me, it's more about the dollar amount. I'd rather give Manaea, let's say 4 at 80 would be my absolute max. I would not go beyond that number of years and that dollar amount. But I think Snell is going to get more than that. And I think I would rather give Snell that money over that same term. I had to step away for a moment. So I don't know if you guys talked about this, but this is something we've talked about on our show. I would rather have Snell than Burns at their respective contracts too. So, look, if you told me 4 years for Burns or 4 years for Snell, I'm going to take Burns at 4 years, sure, because I would apply the same logic. But Burns is going to get more than 4 years. He's probably going to get 6 or 7. And I would rather have Snell at 4 to 5 than Burns at 6 to 7. That would be, just to add to this kind of conversation. So that's where my faith in Snell lies. Look, I've met Blake Snell too, and he just seems like the kind of guy. Yes, he's got the walk issue, but I don't think it's a confidence issue in his stuff. I think he's a very chill, very even keel guy. And I think it would translate to pitching in New York. I know he seems like he's this West Coast, Southern California guy by his demeanor. And he kind of is, but I don't think that he's going to be put off because I think he's just sort of a guy who is who he is, knows who he is, and is kind of quietly confident. I don't think he's a rah-rah guy. I don't think he's a bulldog starting pitcher, like that ace mold in that way, like a Tim Hudson or a Max Scherzer. But I just think that his stuff plays, and I think that he has stretches where he's just so damn dominant. Give me that guy. So for me, it's Snell.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this, I think I've always talked about Sean Manaea as the best investment out of the 3 that we have going on the free agent market, from Luis Severino, Jose Quintana. If you were to ask me this, I would say neither, because I would never give a 4-year deal to like pretty much any pitcher. Like, it's really hard for me to just be like, okay, I am 100% okay with giving a 4-year deal to a pitcher, because a lot can happen in that span, especially with it being the most injury riddled position the way that it is. When I look at it, I feel like you're gonna be paying Manaea to be a number 3 in your rotation. You're gonna be paying Snell to be a top arm in your rotation. I do believe that with the uncertainty with Senga, with a little bit more of the uncertainty of just the spots that you have in your rotation right now, I think that Manaea is the better investment in terms of being the number 3. But when you're talking about it like Blake Snell, if he's your top guy to pair up with Senga, I 100%, if he wants 4 years and that's, the best way to get it done, 100% I would be open to that. When you talk about Manaea, I do think that he can eat innings a lot more. I don't know if it's going to hold up or not. I do think that he has definitely proved in his career he can be sturdy enough to go 150 innings plus. Again, Andrew, like he just brought up, the change in the arm angle could be susceptible to injury. We have seen the guy that he modeled it after, Chris Sale, go through a lot of injuries these last few years. So it's possible. When it comes to somebody like Blake Snell, I feel like they're probably going to rely on a little bit more of a workload than he's used to if they were to sign him at the top of the rotation. I personally would go to Manaea to fill out the rotation and give me those innings, because that's what I'm kind of preferring. But when you talk about overall star power, who's the better pitcher, Snell is definitely that guy. But if you're looking at Blake Snell to pair up with Senga and a 4-year deal gets it done, absolutely. I definitely would look at Burns a little bit first, again, because there's also the workhorse model of him where he's been able to give you 190 plus innings the last 3 seasons. And he also has a little bit less mileage on his arm because he started a little bit later. That also is something that you can put into account. I think that, again, I would not be upset if they were to bring in Snell. I think that the overall investment of getting innings from a pitcher, which is something that is very, very rare these days, as to where typical starters are just going 4 to 5 innings these days. I feel like Manaea can definitely set that up a little bit better. But overall star power and being able to maybe catch up with the Dodgers, Snell would definitely give you a little bit better of a way to do that. And I know Frank wants to add something in with that, of power pitching, of that facing the Dodgers.
Yeah, so when it comes to facing the Dodgers specifically, if someone is saying, "Oh, I need you to lay off pitches," I think Max Muncy could do that pretty well. I think Mookie Betts could do that pretty well, and Tommy Edman and some others. So I don't necessarily think that if I want to beat the Dodgers, Blake Snell is the guy I'm going for. I could see them kind of being pretty patient with him and him not working deep into the game. And if we're concerned about injuries, Blake Snell is the guy who missed a month this season with an injury. Meanwhile, Manaea made every single start. So I would just kind of throw that into the conversation as well.
I think those are both fair points. Like Carson, I like what you said about what you're realistically paying Manaea for. That's something that I've said. Like I want Manaea back, but I think if you bring Manaea back, you still have to go out and get Burns or Snell. Like I think, or trade for Crochet or trade for somebody. It's harder to forecast the trade market because none of us truly know what's available and what the prices are on those players. Whereas you can really kind of figure out, or at least speculate through the sources that everyone does have access to. Oh, okay, yeah, this is kind of the ballpark that you're looking at for, free agent A or free agent B. But this comment from Darren, who's a great commenter on our show, and I think your show as well, saying, would rather have Manaea than Snell because he pitches more innings, although concerned that Manaea ran out of steam. The other thing that I would say to that is, as you get deeper into the season, especially when you get into the playoffs, now you have to make the playoffs. I understand that, but you're also looking at the quality of innings that you are getting. And Manaea did a lot for us in terms of quality of innings over the course of the season and into the playoffs, save for maybe the final game of the year, right? But when you look at the quality of innings, I know you're going to get less innings from Snell, but I think you're going to get more productive innings from Snell on the whole than you would get from Manaea. It's the same reason why I never had a beef with them pitching Senga for an inning or two in the playoffs, despite the fact that he wasn't stretched out, because it's like, look, you get to that point, you're just trying to knock innings off of the calendar, so to speak. You're trying to cut the game down and you're trying to put out high quality pitchers there for as much of the game as you can. So I do think that, the higher upside of Snell is what's intriguing to me. And I do think he has a higher upside based on track record. And I do think going forward, he will continue to be the higher upside pitcher than Manaea.
I mean, in terms of like the competition with the Dodgers, I mean, M-Easy coming off saying, Max Muncy, he's been terrible. Did you watch the Dodgers? Listen, Max Muncy destroyed us in the playoffs, so matchup-wise, I mean, this team that goes very erratic with the strike zone and walks a lot of hitters, he definitely took advantage of that. Also, Max Muncy was not able to really get on track at all. I'm pretty sure he had like 300 plate appearances the entire season. He was out for a majority of the year.
An OPS over 1,000, that's not good. I mean, why? How can that have been a good series against the Mets? Setting a record? No, that's terrible.
Oh, my God. I need to get these two in a cage, M-Easy and Frank. These two.
It's always fun.
Yeah, it's always these two just like the passive aggressiveness is just so perfect. And not to mention, I mean, Max Muncy, we talk about him all the time. Very ideal, very similar to what you get for which Schwarber doesn't chase, does damage in the strike zone. Again, different topic, of course. And I do want to get into the next would you rather, because I don't want to be spending so much time on everything. But I feel like we also have the trade market, which we didn't really get into as much. We've hinted a little bit of the Mets possibly making a blockbuster deal, which most likely would be for somebody like Garrett Crochet. And when it comes to Garrett Crochet, we know that there is going to be quite a return for him. There's going to be a centerpiece prospect, most likely, maybe two centerpiece prospects. We saw Anthony DeComo say that maybe you have to give up 2 top 5s. But when it comes to, the log jam that the Mets have at second base right now, most likely one of these possible second basemen would be put in a trade. And to my question of what I would ask you guys here is, who would you consider as more of a centerpiece or willing to give up in a blockbuster trade, that being Jett Williams or Luisangel Acuna? I think you can go from different angles because we know we saw Luisangel Acuna come up here, be very productive in the little small sample he gave you. We know that you have the first-round pedigree from Jett Williams. He's had some injury history, which we did not really get into. That also can be added as well. Regarding anybody's opinions, mine. But regarding anyone's opinions about Jett Williams or Luis Angel Acuna, Andrew, I'll go to you as to if you would be willing to put a centerpiece of Jett Williams or Luis Angel Acuna. I know this was one of the would you rathers that you came up with. So if you want to start us off and lay the foundation, what it would be your thought process in this sense of these two second basemen in a logjam?
I mean, it's kind of the game of what you've seen and what you haven't seen. It's the guy who had a 2-week sample in the major leagues compared to a guy who played 2 weeks of minor league baseball, it seemed like, because he's always getting hurt. But again, for me, especially for the guy that's on the graphic next to Juan Soto, if it's Crochet, it's going to start with Jett Williams, and I'm completely okay sending Jett Williams to Chicago and never see a winning season ever in his 20-year big league career if he has one, because of the fact that he got injured during the regular season, which they said, all right, make up for time, go play in the Arizona Fall League. What happens in the Arizona Fall League with like less than 3 games left to play? He gets hurt again. So again, it's an asset that is diminished because of the injury concern all last year. So you didn't see his value go up or down. It just kind of, hover it out and say what he is. And the fact that, again, you saw Luis Angel Acuna. Yes, we saw this again, which we always made the joke of DJ Stewart. Well, in September, he played really well. Yes, different circumstances where Acuna was doing this in a pennant race and performed when our best player got hurt and kind of played to the same level of him. Again, it's 2 weeks. Again, we saw same with like Mauricio and other guys. But for me, if you're telling me who am I rather trading, especially for Garrett Crochet, I'd rather trade the guy I have not seen any MLB at-bats for, and if there's still that, will he, question mark, where I've seen at least Acuna show something in the big leagues. Is it sustainable? We'll see, but I'd rather trade the guy I know than the guy I don't.
Yeah. Ibby, I'll go to you. I know you're a Jett Williams fan. I know we've never had this discussion before regarding him. But when it comes to centerpieces, of course, Acuna probably would not be as big of a centerpiece as Jett Williams. But somebody that you would be willing to give up, let's say, gun to your head, who would you be willing of these two little people that could play second base for the Mets in the future?
Look, the way I look at both of them, I think to what Andrew was just saying, it's going to be Jett, because in all circles, in all places, he's still the number one prospect in this system, and people have just a higher grade on him all around, because coming up with Acuna, granted the 2 weeks that he was up here, he kind of disproved the people that questioned his overall skill set and his tools or what have you, and he played well. Again, small sample size, as it was just said, but he did show out a little bit more. But if you are trying to get a 25-year-old flame-throwing lefty from Chicago, then it's going to be Williams higher on that list as opposed to Acuna. I believe that wholeheartedly. And in general, I don't want to go too off topic on this, but to answer the question at hand, yes, I would, even as a Jett Williams fan and supporter, I would easily put him in a package to get a 25-year-old lefty like a Garrett Crochet. But the problem that I have with all of it is that as much as the reports come out, whether we believe them or not, when it comes to Chicago wanting up the middle type players, when you're dealing away a player like this, you're not dealing away a player to just settle for something. It's kind of like, drafting for need versus drafting the talent. And I don't think it's Chicago. They could be dumb enough, but I don't think that they would settle in these situations. I would hope that they would not settle in a situation. And even as a Jett Williams fan, if you're telling me that teams are offering you players of a much higher ilk, but they play corner positions, whether it's outfield or infield, whether it's Kobe Mayo or Sam Basayo or Christian Campbell or Roman Anthony or anyone like that, those dwarf, no pun intended, those dwarf everything that the Mets have to offer. So again, it's fun to talk about. Yes, I would include him if I'm getting a Crochet, but I really don't think the quantity that the Mets can offer Chicago would be enough versus the quality that other teams can offer.
Yeah. I mean, John, I'll go to you in this regard because I feel like, you have been very adamant in, giving up what you need to bring in one of these top pieces if you have these bullets to spare.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to like Jett or Acuna in their sense of, moving on from them and bringing in a bigger piece, such as Garrett Crochet, or maybe there's somebody else out there that is made available that we don't know. What do you think in that regard?
I'll just preface it really quick by saying a couple things. One, Garrett Crochet does scare me a little bit. There's some things about the fact that he's, he does not have the length. We just talked about that with Minaya and Snell, but like he's like never done it. He spent part of the time as a reliever, and there's a lot of stuff about Garrett Crochet that scares me. The upside is stellar. I mean, you got a young lefty fireballer, great stuff. So I just will say that. I'll also say that I don't love either prospect. I was not super high on Acuna. I've not been super high on Jett Williams. I'm also not a prospect hugger like you alluded to. So I'll give up either guy, theoretically, if you tell me we can get a cost-controlled young lefty that throws hard and has great stuff. I think you made a great point when you said that Jett has the pedigree because of that round 1 pick. The injuries certainly are an issue there. Before the season, I would have said that Jett Williams was the better prospect. A lot of people who rank prospects and know more about systems than I do have said that, so I just would have deferred to that. But I know it's a small sample size. Acuna showed us, though, that sometimes big leaguers are just big leaguers. And I'm not saying that the 2 weeks means everything, but you want to talk about pedigree. This is a guy who literally has pedigree. His brother is one of the best players in baseball. I don't think he'll ever be that good, but it's just the truth. His father was no slouch. You've got like this, just knows how to be a major league ball player. And sometimes that's enough. So to me, maybe that sample size, that small sample size, and that what Acuna came up and did makes him a little bit more valuable than it would have been had he not come up and had that. But to me, that makes him a little harder for me to trade away. So I would say Jett Williams is the more likely guy to get it done. And he's the guy I would be more comfortable dealing. Like, even if Jett Williams became a superstar somewhere, I would just, I don't know. There's something about trading Ronald Acuna's brother and then having him become a superstar that just would bother me more. You know what I mean? Like, you just look at it, you're like, I don't know, man. It seems more likely that he could be great. Maybe that's based off nothing. It's not super scientific, but so I would trade Jett Williams. I would keep Acuna.
All right, Frank, I'll go to you. We've talked about these little people. I know that you are very similar in size with them. I'm sorry. I'm just everyone's catching strays for no reason. But Jett or Acuna, who would you much rather move on from if it meant bringing in a specified trade target?
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to what John was saying about this someone called experts and how they rank people. So again, they had Jett around 1 or 2, and we were seeing as the season progressed, before Acuna got called up, he kept getting lower in the rankings. All of a sudden, by the time it was all said and done, he was ranked as number 12 prospect on the Mets. They're like, oh, wait, maybe this guy isn't that good, and maybe he's just not all that. Then he gets called up, and dare I say, he was better than I expected, and I think maybe a lot of the experts expected. And I'll throw this number out there. I feel like I've mentioned this before, but Ronald Acuna, not Ronald Acuna, Luis Angel Acuna, I wish I had Ronald, but Luis Angel Acuna, he hit 3 home runs in 39 play appearances. Meanwhile, Brett Beatty hit 4 home runs in 153 play appearances. So, that right there, like, he showed you more in like a couple of weeks than some other guys show you in months. So I want to see what I have in this guy. I'm not in a rush to just trade him away. And like we always say, like Andrew was making the point, I put more value on the guy that actually got to the big leagues and not someone who's got this injury and that injury. Like, no, thank you. I like what Acuna provides me, and that's just power alone. We didn't even get to really see his speed yet on the major league diamond, which we know was really good in the minors. And I still just want to see what an up-the-middle defense of Acuna and Lindor looks like. I think it could be really exciting. And we talk about building up the middle. I think that's a really nice up the middle to have. And when we're talking about the experts, so if I'm a White Sox team and I'm looking at, okay, should I get the number 1 prospect or the number 12 prospect? That means that if I give up number 1, I have to give away a lot less, because it's not just going to be 1 for 1 and you get Crochet. It's a package. So if I have to give up Jett, but less prospects and less like other really good prospects, definitely, because with Acuna, I'm still going to have to give up other top guys. So for me, I mean, it's Jett all the way is what I'm trading.
Oh, just really quick to add, because Andrew did make a lot of great points, and Frank reminded me of one of them. This is not DJ Stewart coming up in August where the games didn't mean anything. Like he said, this is, coming up in a pennant race. He also was filling in for Lindor, dude. Like he was playing shortstop MVP for a guy who, when he got hurt, was maybe going to win the MVP. And outside of one error that he then made up for, he played a stellar shortstop. He was great. He hit the home run. Like he did everything that you would want him to do. It was almost like, and I love Lindor, so this is not an attack on, but it's almost like Lindor didn't miss any time. That's how good Acuna was, stepping in the shoes of a guy who almost won the MVP, and the Mets didn't skip a beat. I'm not trading that guy. Or at least I'd not like to trade that guy. That kid
I want to see what I have. I want to see what I have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think he's deserved the gateway to, get a chance with this organization. Now, Project Ball said this in the chat earlier, saying trade the prospects for Crochet. Most of the bats in the farm are overrated. And I will say that I do agree with this in somewhat. I'm trying to find the tweet from Daniel Wexler. By the way, for those of you who don't know Daniel Wexler, one of the best. If you guys want to follow on Twitter, gives you some really good insight about a lot of minor league players. But talking about a lot of the batted ball data and talking about a lot of what has been going on with a lot of these young players, and throughout the Mets farm system, overall their ranks out of 30, a lot of these batted ball data, a lot of them are bottom 10 out of all the farm systems regarding offensive tools and stuff like that. I don't know if Brett Beatty counts in any of that, but I don't know if he weighs that much down. But when it comes to some of these prospects, I do see it. I do see it regards to some of these young players where I'm like, okay, I'm seeing some things where I'm like, this is not going to translate to the major leagues from top to bottom. There's some that I do believe that can be good, but next level, when you're talking about the Mets farm system, pitching is a little bit more of the emphasis as of right now. I do think that there are some bats that they just drafted under Stearns and under Ben Gross that could be pieces that could elevate into great major league hitters. But there are some that they inherited that I would say that like there's red flags. There are definitely some red flags. I know Vientos has come through fairly well. I know Acuna gave you some stuff. You've been seen a little bit from Alvarez in flashes, but you're still waiting to see some of that consistency. But when it comes to the Mets farm system, I would, and it's not really anything that I have trolling wise when it comes to Jett Williams. I feel like the way that it's handled, the way that he is viewed, I think that he's viewed a little bit differently by the Mets as compared to other farm systems. I personally got a little bit frustrated when I saw that he got hurt in center field, because I personally think he should not be playing center field with the small body that he does have. And you should not have a 5'6" center fielder. That should not be happening when the shortest that you usually see is like 6'1", 6'2". Different topic. I prefer to trade somebody like Jett Williams, not only because of, the value that he does withhold as a first-round pick with that type of pedigree. We know that he is regarded as a prospect. When it comes to somebody like Luis Angel Acuna, something that the Mets have really been missing, and we saw it on the major league stage, being tools. The Mets have really missed a lot of tools to fill into the margins, and I think that makes him a very decent prospect that can really help you win games. And he did help you win games in the most important stretch in the season. I'm not talking about it as recency bias. I'm just saying as to where there's a lot of things that could translate from Luis Angel Acuna. I haven't really seen much translate for Jett Williams in the upper levels of the minor leagues yet. And he's also hasn't been on the field to show it for me.
You know, Carson, it's funny because if you want to take recency bias aside and just go to a person who's neither one of the players that we mentioned, I know it comes at a time when the Mets were not playing for anything, but when you mention tools and the spark that can provide, let's not forget 2 years ago when Ronnie Mauricio came up and you just saw athleticism and tools on display. That's the kind of thing that this team has lacked a lot of the time, you know, over recent memory when they've been bad or when they've been good, but not good enough. And I think that the spark that players like that can provide, I don't know what Ronnie Mauricio is going to be after this massive knee injury, but, you know, he was a guy I really liked because he was, to me, he was the poor man's Ellie De La Cruz or O'Neal Cruz. Like that's the kind of body type that he was bringing. And that's the kind of flash and sizzle that he had. And I also think you need some guys with a little bit of swag too. You know what I mean? Give me the Acuna swag. Give me the Mauricio swag. Like, I think you need that too. I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that like Jett doesn't have any tools. I just think that it's a little bit as to where I feel like it just comes a little bit more fluent in a way when it comes to somebody like Luisangel Acuna. Mainly, it's just, I mean, he's older, so it's easier to say this now. When you're looking at it, you know, in hindsight or whatever, I don't think anybody really had Acuna in the formula or in like the, you know, the neck of the woods for the future of this team. But I think that Acuna has deserved an opportunity to win the second base job come spring training. And I'd love to see what I've had, just like what Frank said, in somebody like Luisangel Acuna, who's really been impressive. And I want to see if he can continue that. And personally, I don't think that he does have the value that Jett Williams ever will, with the, you know, the reported upside regarding somebody like Jett Williams being as young as he is, and you don't know what he's going to do. I'm sure Jett Williams and Luisangel Acuna, they'll, at the end of the day, they both will be fine major league players. But when it comes to what we have seen at the major league level, I think that I'm willing to see what Luisangel Acuna can offer next year, and if it means packing away Jett Williams in that trade, regardless of my opinion on him, I think that they should be willing to do that. You know, if it comes to the right guy, like John said, you know, Crochet does scare you in a point where, you know, not much mileage on his arm, but not much mileage to where, you know, he can pitch those types of innings as a starter, you know, just became a starter. And then there's also the talk about him wanting an extension. I mean, there's a lot of other factors when it comes to somebody like Garrett Crochet. I would be interested to see what this Mets organization can do with him, and hopefully see him not get ruined by an organization such as the White Sox of what they do with all of these players, which is pretty much a disgrace what we have seen from the White Sox over these last few seasons. But Ibby, you said you wanted to add something.
Yes, just to throw out real quick, I think it'd be hilarious for everything to come full circle if he does end up going to Chicago. Since you love comping him to Nick Madrigal so much, I think that would be a very fun full circle moment. And if this was the aforementioned tweet that you were talking about when it came to Daniel Wexler, when it was talked about when it came to the Mets rankings, when it comes to the hitting side, they ranked 28th in hit plus, 8th in 90th percentile EVs, 26th in contact rate, 17th in chase rate, and 23rd in barrel rate. So not the greatest of numbers down low. Once again, shout out to Daniel Wexler for all the great stuff he puts out on Twitter.
Yeah, he does amazing stuff, by the way. Again, like I said, he is a great follow, one of the best follows on Mets Twitter. But I think that, you know, when you look at it from overall tools being applied, I think that they definitely improved it with the draft in terms of some of the guys. Carson Bench, who I do believe
they drafted you.
Definitely, yeah, they drafted me. People thought I was him for a good 72 hours, and I was getting like DMs. I mean, listen, it's whatever. I think it was a funny joke, and I just let it ride out. But Carson Bench, another guy that I do expect to go, through the minor league system very quickly, could definitely deepen it a little bit. Hopefully I can deepen the time as my camera keeps shutting off. But I'm running out of analogies to do when it shuts off. But anyways, in regards to other areas that you can address, I do want to bring up another one. We're kind of going over with time here, but when it comes to the back end of the bullpen, we know that the Mets are going to have to addressed that as well during the offseason. And there are some pieces that could be some flyers that they take on. I do think that they're not going to spend as big. They might look for some bounce back candidates, or maybe they make a trade or whatever. Andrew has talked about that before, of them making a trade for some pieces in the bullpen as, one of the main guys that they get. I think that in terms of the situation, getting the bridge to Diaz, this is a typo, by the way, but which back end would you prefer to have? Clay Holmes struggling a little bit with David Bednar possibly there, or would you go with somebody like Fairbanks or Loaizaga? I think that these are a little bit these are a little bit bounce back candidates to maybe where you can stack up arms in that way. Because to be honest, looking at these 4 arms that are being mentioned as of right now, you would not probably have this conversation 2 years ago, because all 4 of these arms are possibly some of the best arms in all of baseball out of the bullpen at that time. Gets a little finicky with relievers. Andrew, I'll go to you. Guys, just ignore the headline at the top there. That was supposed to be for the back end, but typos happen because Carson does a lot of these graphics towards about, 3 a.m. in the morning. Andrew, I'll start with you. Where would you go to? Holmes, Bednar, or Fairbanks, Loaizaga?
Like I said, like at the trade deadline, I was always banging the damn table for Pete Fairbanks, and then the Padres decided to trade their whole damn farm system for Jason Adam, so that kind of threw that one out. So hopefully now the offseason resets of not as desperation in-season type trades for relievers. For me, Fairbanks with Johnny Lasagna makes the most sense, because Fairbanks has been the most consistent reliever of the 4. Obviously, we would think Bednar's had the highest peak of the 3. Holmes obviously had some Yankee in New York success. So I know Frank matters a lot that he's done it in New York, but also had some blow-ups. But for me, getting Fairbanks with Johnny Lasagna, again, it's good. 2 good arms. Again, you're getting the more reliable of the 2. Driving it insane. Loaizaga,
Is this going to be the new Vientos shit?
Ventos, god damn it. But again, you're getting 2 good arms. I think Fairbanks has been the more reliable of the 2, and again, he can be your pure setup man. If you don't believe in your needing to have that backup closer, you have Fairbanks that can be the legit setup man. And then again, Loaizaga can be that kind of buy low Ryan Stanek level of can work his way up throughout the bullpen and be that high leverage arm, which again has the success in New York. Yes, the injury bug has killed him, so give me Fairbanks and Loaizaga.
All right, Frank, I'll go right to you. Out of all of these 4 arms, there's been a lot of bumps in the road for all of them, whether it's injuries, inconsistencies, losing their jobs. There has been definitely a conglomerate of things that have happened for a lot of these relievers. It usually happens for all relievers, but what combination would you lean towards getting that bridge to Edwin Diaz in the 9th?
I absolutely love the second combination. I love both of those guys a lot. I have a bias to the Tampa Bay Rays organization. I just love all the pitching that they put out there. They just always seem to have guys that are just really reliable, and Fairbanks is kind of one of the leaders in that regard. He's just done it for such a long time. He's done it in the postseason. He's someone that I love to have. And then for Loaizaga, the stuff is just so nasty. How do you not want that in your bullpen? The Mets could definitely use somebody with that kind of stuff to really give them. And that's something that we talked about, like the struggles with Maton, as far as we don't think that kind of arsenal is good for high leverage, trying to get those strikeouts. Meanwhile, Loaizaga, it's that's exactly what you want as far as talk about a bridge piece to get to Edwin Diaz. For Bednar, he had a really bad year last year, and he's been very good in the past. So maybe this the lowest value you could try to pull something off. But as far as Clay Holmes, I want nothing to do with him. He lost his job because of how bad he was. So I think he doesn't have the mental aspect that you need to be the high leverage guy, especially in New York. So I want nothing to do with it. He just gave up, and the home run ball, way too big of a problem. You know how I feel about home runs and relievers. Biggest no you could do. So for me, I love Fairbanks. I would love to give Loaizaga a flyer just to kind of see rehab and all that stuff, and just the stuff that he has. Those other 2 guys, I do have my worries about. So that second row, I love it. I hope they can do it.
All right. these two combinations, mix and match if you guys want to. Ibby, I'll go to you. What you would be looking at if you're David Stearns of some bounce back candidates in the bullpen.
I mean, as we talk about it, and we can pick and choose how we want here, no matter what. I mean, when Stearns has the opportunity to pick the guys that he, deems worthy, if you will, of the pitching lab for the Mets, I have full confidence in it. But if I'm looking at it, I really feel like Fairbanks and Loaisiga are two prototypical names that, in terms of when to go after them, when to get them at a certain price point, opportunity, stuff, all the things that Frank was just alluding to. I really think that Fairbanks and Loaisiga make a ton of sense from a price point, like I just said, from the time that you're going to be obtaining them. Like I just really think that they make a ton of sense. And I'm always looking at stuff. I'm always talking about how stuff is a big deal. I think both of them have, stuff that would definitely put them towards the front of trust. If they can get things proper and get things right, I think that they would be two huge gets. And of course, I have full trust when it comes to David Stearns and picking these guys out. But I think those two really stick out. To your point, Carson, if you would have said this, 2-3 years ago, someone like David Bednar, who was, lights out, was doing great for Pittsburgh, but loses his job to Chapman. And he's kind of been rough the last 2 years. And Clay Holmes, everything Frank just said, the home runs. It's like, I know he had success in New York, and you want guys that have some success in New York. But for me right now, I can't see myself saying him, maybe because everything is so fresh and I can't do it. But if I'm picking between those names, I would definitely side with the likes of Fairbanks and Loaisiga.
Yeah. All right. John, I'll go to you in regards to, those combinations.
Yeah. You know what? I think it's going to be a clean sweep for Fairbanks and Loaisiga. And honestly, going last in this regard, I don't have that much to add that hasn't already been said. But just to kind of echo a lot of the things that Frank was saying, like Fairbanks has the best track record, which you love. Bullpen guys are always fickle. Bullpen guys are going to be up and down, but give me the guy with the most reliability. Also, yes, Tampa. It's a pitching factory. Tampa. And then like he said, and like Ibby just said, stuff. I was a big proponent of the Mets trying to get Jordan Hicks last year because I want somebody in the bullpen not named Edwin Diaz that can throw 100 miles an hour. I think that stuff is really important, and eventually the way that they were able to get things going at the deadline, they did bring in those guys. Like Stanek has really great stuff. It didn't work out with Brazaban, but guy who's got a bit better stuff. So I think the upside and the stuff of Loaisiga is something that is super intriguing. And then the reliability of Fairbanks, to me, that is the better of the two. Holmes scares me. Whoever said, I think Carson, I forgot who said it, but he lost his job. That scares me. I don't want the guy who lost. I know Diaz sort of lost his job in a kind of sort of way, but it was for a few different reasons. It wasn't just because of just unbelievable ineffectiveness, which is what we saw with Clay Holmes. So I don't want that. I would go the other direction. And yeah, Bednar's not been that great recently, so maybe it's a little bit of recency bias, but give me Fairbanks, give me Loaisiga.
Yeah, I think out of all of these four, if you're looking at it right here, I think it's the most likely that these two Yankees right here could possibly be on the table for the Mets, whether you're talking about it from Loaisiga or Holmes, because this is something that Frankie put in the chat. This could be a connection that they do make, as the Mets did hire the assistant Yankees pitching coach. I think it was Desi Dresskol. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. But we had a few here more, but I do want to get to the big one here, which was the final one to end off regarding Juan Soto. Now, I did ask you guys in the chat to, as our poll, basically, if you would consider the Mets offseason a failure if they were to lose the Juan Soto sweepstakes. 30% of you are saying yes, 42% of you are saying no, and then 28% of you are saying too early to say. So there's definitely a decent split there. But then there's the backup plan as to where you're looking at it in outfield wise. I feel like, who would you rather pivot to if you miss out on Juan Soto, if that would be Teoscar Hernandez or that would be Anthony Santander. Now, our special guests do have to leave, so I will let them answer first, and then we'll end off the show with three of us. John, I will go to you first. Your preferred pivot, let's say if the Mets were to miss out on Soto.
My preferred pivot has been, will continue to be, and just is Anthony Santander. I don't know if I'm quite as high on him as you are, but I like him a lot as a baseball player. I know he comes with defensive deficiencies, but the man can mash. I talked about the importance of, pairing Soto with Alonso to lengthen the lineup and add more power. I think that you would have to do that even more so if you missed out on Soto. So I think Santander is the perfect guy to do that and to fit that spot. And then Armand just threw it in the comments. It's not a huge sample size, but Santander can play first base. So he also provides you with a little bit of protection in case you were, and I don't think this would happen, but in case you miss out on Soto and then you don't sign Alonso, he does give you a little bit more versatility. Maybe you can put Santander at first base, and then you can go get a different outfielder. You can go trade for somebody, but whatever. It gives you a lot more flexibility there. Again, it's not a tremendous sample size. Also, it's something that gives you some protection. Let's say that you get, Alonso, but then in 3 years, you want to move Alonso to DH. You can move Santander to first base, and then you can kind of go from there, looking forward into the future. I think the power plays, I think the hit tool is top tier. I think Santander gets forgotten about a lot because he played on some terrible Baltimore teams. When he first came up, he was the only guy, and now they have such a good team with such good players that he gets forgotten about as the one who's been there for the longest time. So to me, it's him every day. I do not really want Teoscar Hernandez. He seems like the perfect guy that went to the Dodgers and was good and then will not be as good leaving the Dodgers. It just feels like that. That's not based on anything. It just feels like that's the way it would go.
All right. Ibby, I'll go to you because you also have to leave in the coming minutes. Santander or Teoscar?
I would choose Santander. We've talked about him on our show a good amount, and that would be my number one pivot if the Soto sweepstakes do not fall in our favor. Looking at their Savant pages, I know we're looking for power and things of that nature. If you look over the last 3 years between Santander and Teoscar, one of those 3 years, Teoscar would have 30-plus home runs, whereas Santander would have 30-plus home runs all of those, those 3 years in general. And to a point that Frank made earlier, that was just getting somebody else in the lineup that's not predominantly a righty. Santander bats from both sides of the plate. I think that would go a long way in helping this team. And I just think that, to John's point, he's someone that doesn't get the respect he deserves, because for a while Baltimore was bad, but he was still putting up numbers and he was just getting better and better. And then, then they got into the likes of, the hype of Jackson Holiday. And then they have Gunnar Henderson who starts showing up. And then you have, Colton Cowser coming up and all these guys and all these prospects and everything. And he kind of gets tossed by the wayside. And it's not proper because he is a damn good power bat. He's a switch hitter. I think he would do damage here. I think that, Savant with the expected numbers shows that. I think he would be a fantastic get. I have no problem with Teoscar. I didn't think it made any sense for Seattle to just basically throw him away. He was that's something you could use. Maybe he just got lost in Seattle because of the park or whatever. And, the Dodgers get players and they just become superstars. But I think Teoscar is best built to stay in LA. And I'm not sure if it would translate here. I'm not 100% sure. But in terms of the lineup that we have, what we could use, a switch hitter with power like that, I think Santander is the move that I would definitely make 10 times out of 10.
All right. Well, Ibby, thank you for joining us, as well as your
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
And I'm not joking.
Follow.
I'm not joking real quick. I said it in the chat as M-Easy and Frank keep going at it. Okay, talking about doing somersaults and everything. Next episode, I want Frank and M-Easy showing their skills when it comes to the pommel horse. I want to see what you people are made of. I will be tuned in and I will be in the comments and I want to see what's going to happen. Okay, do a somersault. Do the somersault off that piano behind you. I know the piano's back there. I want you to do a somersault off that piano. Okay. Other than that, thank you so much for having me.
Yep.
I appreciate you guys. All the love.
All right. Guys, make sure to go follow Till Mets Do Us Part. Their links are in the description for them individually as well as all of us individually. Thank you, Ibby. Thank you to John as well for joining us. Frank, I will go to you on this one. Teoscar or Santander, two of your favorites, I know, on the big stage. What do you think?
Yeah, I will just say, in fairness of my man Teoscar Hernandez, I think people kind of forget how good he was in Toronto before he got to Seattle. This wasn't like a 1 year, oh, this guy went to the Dodgers and now he's good all of a sudden. Like, no, this guy was even better in Toronto. I just think that Seattle is not a good hitting place. Just look at what happened last year when Teoscar was there. They maybe Andrew, like, was it one of the worst offenses we've seen in the league? I mean, they were just everyone was
nobody hitting Safeco. Yeah, that's no, yeah.
So I will just give it fair to Teoscar, but overall, like mainly the fit for this particular Mets team is Santander. Obviously, the pull hitter, the switch hitter. I think that Teoscar, as much as I love him individually as a player, with the fit, his struggles would align with the Mets as far as the breaking balls on the outside. I can see Teoscar having the same struggles a lot of these other guys already have. So he would be a little redundant as much as I do love him. Santander is the better fit. He is also 2 years younger, so that's also something to consider. Now, it's kind of this thing where we talked about as far as like the Manaea and Snell, like how do the contracts kind of play out? Like because Santander has the better value, like if the contracts are like hugely disparity, like then I might have a little bit more to think about. But just in general, Santander is the better fit.
We clean sweep in this one, Andrew? Because I'm picking Santander. You know I am. I've been monitoring him since his rookie year. So what do you think?
I mean, yeah, but I'll give Teo a little more love, which again, another thing which we talked about earlier about postseason performances. Yes, Toronto got choked an 8-0 lead to Seattle Mariners. Don't want to talk about that too much. Teo had a grand slam, a 3-run homer, and then you look throughout the Dodgers run. Look what the difference. The Dodgers are always in the playoffs every year. Teoscar Hernandez shows up, and he's kind of like that it factor little thing that put them over the edge. But yeah, besides the point, like Teo, obviously, it's Santander to have that, so again, like everybody said, switch hitting, power bat, like John said, an extra option at first base if need be, which is never a bad thing. I mean, I think it's more of an MLB The Show thing, but it gives you he has played at least in a game, so at least I'll give it that. It's just, like, is there a little concern? Yes, because again, the on-base percentage has been the main thing. Everyone in the mass media is talking about, well, he doesn't walk enough. I don't care. He's hitting 40 bombs. Like, I really don't care about, like, well, he doesn't walk enough. Yeah, we got Brandon Nimmo to do that. Francisco Lindor can do that. I just need a guy to take that ball, middle and fastball, and hit it to the Grimace seat out in the Coca-Cola corner, and he can do that.
To do that. I mean, he's protected. Yeah. I mean, not to mention he does make a lot of contact with the baseball, even though he does chase a little bit more than you want him to. Yeah, Santander is the guy that I'm going to, not just because of, Teoscar chasing the way that he kind of does and would definitely play in, but also the left-handed bat. I mean, it's something that they really need to add. And from both angles, he has been a very balanced hitter. The dead pull hitter that he is, I would like to see a little bit of the pitch selection go, a little bit better. But he's also had some of these seasons where, he's had some solid pitch selection. It's not great, but he's definitely situational. He comes through. Let's just say that. And we all know that how good he has been on the main stage, whether you count the WBC or not. It's highly competitive. He's definitely come through there. We've seen some Santander, postseason moments. We know that, Baltimore didn't go very far, so I don't really know. I think he
scored one run.
Yeah, they scored like one run this year, so he hasn't been in the playoffs that much, but we've seen him on a big stage many, many times, and he has come through. And the power definitely it's not top 1% power, but it is up there as to where he can give you 30 to 35 homers. And even though when you're looking at these expected numbers from expected home runs, I mean, Citi Field is one of the lowest, and even though he would only be playing 81 games there, so it wouldn't matter. Citi Field is one of the lowest for his expected home runs, but then you're kind of looking at it from the last 3 years, 32 from 2022, which 32 home runs in Citi Field is pretty good. 35 from Citi Field in 2023, and then 36 in 2024 he would have had at Citi Field. So that's still some really good power. Let's just say one thing regarding Jock Peterson. Video will be coming out later on regarding some bats that the Mets can go after regarding the DH position. But tomorrow we will be having a video come out 5:30. Andrew, it's a solo video for him. He's going to be talking about the center field position as to what they're going to be, talking about. It's kind of just like a 2-minute video of us just saying retain Harrison Bader and then just move on. But it's definitely something that I think a lot of people will enjoy from a lot of different aspects for the center field market of levels that you can look at it from, of role players to star players that are available on the trade market, because it's very thin on the center field market. Like we said, it's led by Harrison Bader at this current point. So it's definitely not deep. Let's just say that. But other than that, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Last thoughts, of course. Still haven't seen much movement unless some news dropped while we were live. I don't think any have. I think everybody was looking at it, and everybody in the chat would have let us know if something happened. Frank, I'll go to you. Some final words that you would like to give hope to everyone and joyous. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just, we just have to hope that we get the big fish, that we're able to bring that home and put that under the Christmas tree, and that'll just make us all very jolly. And so that's really what we want to see.
All right. Well, that was festive. Andrew?
Again, enjoy, we're waiting for that big guy. It's almost big guy season with Thanksgiving a couple weeks, so we gotta get some turkey in a couple weeks, and hopefully maybe we do something before Turkey Day, because before I go into a coma, I'd like them to actually make a move. It'd be great. But again, we still got MVP. Obviously, Luke Ritter's gonna win it and beat Shohei Ohtani. But besides that, qualifying offers on Wednesday, and then we get going.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have some other sports that can occupy me, of two teams that are trying to compete for me with the Knicks and Rangers, so I definitely have some time in between there. And then, of course, we're working on some other content, of course, throughout the week. 2 videos coming out, one tomorrow and on Thursday. Want to thank everybody for watching us live. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Thanks again to, once again, John Saponaro and Matt Ibanez for coming on. Our special guest, their podcast, Till Mets Do Us Part. All the links are in the description. Make sure to go follow them, check them out. Of course, some of our good friends in this Mets community, along with some other creators that we've had the privilege of having them on our show as well. But other than that, make sure to turn on post notifications to know when we go live, as well as some content that's coming out throughout the week. We have plenty of content in the works, again, all off season long, so stay tuned for that. Make sure to follow Mets Weekly on X and on TikTok. Follow all of us individually. And, of course, let's go Mets. Let's hope that big fish, like we said, the Mets are able to retain him. I can't really do much Christmas references because I'm Jewish. So, anyways, I don't know. I'm not educated in that way. But other than that, we'll see you guys next time. Peace out. And, yeah, we'll see you.